All right, good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of council for Monday, August 29th. We have a bit of a lengthy meeting in front of us, so we're going to go the O Canada and then a moment of reflection, followed by the Deputy Mayor Sorrento doing the reading of the land acknowledgement. Over to the clerk. Please rise for O Canada. Okay, just doing an audio check. I want to make sure that I think everyone on Zoom can hear me. Thumbs up. Yep, Councillor Kushner gave me a thumbs up. So just looking for the online. Me or somebody on Zoom? Councillor Garcia, can you say a few words? Trying to see if we can get online with our.
Yes, and I said earlier that I could not hear O Canada.
What we're testing right now is to see if we can hear you on the live stream. If it was. So it was the O Canada audio that wasn't go through. Councillor Garcia, can you just speak for another 10 seconds?
Yes, I will speak for another 10 seconds. Is that it?
Yep, we're good.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, you can hear me okay?
Yep, looks like we've got that audio. So for those who weren't able to hear O Canada, apologize for that. The words were up on the screen, so hopefully you sang along at home. Here in council chambers, Deputy Mayor Sorrento held the tune. So I'll turn it over to the Deputy Mayor for the land acknowledgement.
I will not sing this, Mr. Mayor, I will read it. The land on which council meets today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. This gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Acknowledging this is a reminder that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people.
Thank you very much. And we're just going to head into a brief mayor's report, try to keep it brief, as we got a lot of items on the agenda. I just want to start by thanking all of the organizers, volunteers, and those who participated in the Canada Games. Specifically, all of the staff who have been working with the Canada Games over the past 3+ years. The games itself was arguably, I think, one of the most successful games ever held, according to the chair of the Canada Games, who attended most of the 2 weeks events and festivities. To Doug Hamilton and his board of directors and the staff of the Canada Games, congratulations for hosting a very successful 2-week sporting event, the largest of which has never been held before in Niagara. More than 5,000 athletes over 2 weekends participated. I know a number of councillors were able to take in some of the events. I myself was able to take in a number of different events, and I got to say the attendance at the events at the Canada Games Park was outstanding. A lot of the events going into the medal rounds were sold out. The 13 for 13 events, which were the cultural events that were happening across the community, were very well attended, including here in downtown St. Catharines. We were partnering with UConn. It was an amazing experience to see the UConn athletes come through, and we had some amazing talent from UConn playing. In addition to that, the opening ceremonies at the Meridian Centre were absolutely spectacular. The closing ceremonies in Niagara Falls were equally special for all those who participated in the games. I just want to give a special acknowledgement to Doug Hamilton, who was awarded the key to the city for all of the work that he's put in since the opening bid of the Canada Games back in 2016. So it was a very special 2 weeks, one that's going to have a lot of memories for all the volunteers. I think there was over 3,000 volunteers that participated in the Canada Games, many of whom were from here in our community and across Niagara. They helped to make the game special. There will be more information coming out, but I do also want to acknowledge there was a tremendous amount of Indigenous inclusion in the games, the most that have ever been included in the games, including the bringing back of lacrosse for the first time in 17 years, women's lacrosse for the first time ever, and there was, from the opening ceremonies to the closing ceremonies, there was a strong presence of Indigenous inclusion in the games. And so, again, talking to the organizers of the Canada Games as a council, we hope that this sets a new high watermark for Indigenous inclusions moving forward. And so I just want to acknowledge all the efforts. The LGBTQ2+ community, they had a Pride Night at Canada Games Park. There was just a lot of different celebrations that had taken place. The para-athletes that were there. And I could just share a quick story, talking to one of the para-athletes who was in a wheelchair from Alberta, and anyone who's at the track and field, you no longer hear the bang of the gun go off. You hear like a more silent, a more subtle start to the 100-meter, 200-meter, and that was in para-athletes. Certain athletes, when they hear when there's a sound of a gun going off, their muscles will seize, and so it prevents them from starting to join the race. And so learning those kind of things about those kind of aspects about how sport is changing and adapting was a unique experience for me. So just wanted to start by acknowledging how important the games were, from the Walker Sports and Ability Center to the Henley Rowing Center, and also being able to acknowledge Sandy Bellows. There's a room at Canada Games Park that was named in her honor, and that's the Universal and Family Change Room, which was a fitting recognition for Sandy for all the work that she did with the Canada Games, but also in the community with sport, family, and community. So it was a fitting recognition for her. In addition to that, the Indigenous Partnership Council, which was part of the games, they gifted the city of St. Catharines a beautiful handmade drum from a local artist collective in support of the 2022 Olympics. The 13 Moon Drum Initiative pays honor to the white pine deer and 13 moons of creation. And I want to give a special thanks to Jackie Labonte and Oliver, who came up with the concept that each of the provinces and each of the participating athletic teams from each province would be gifted one of these to take back to their community as well. And so I guess gotta hold it up here. This is what was gifted for our community, and the presentation was made to each province and its municipal partners. So a similar one was given to the community of Yukon as well to take back to their territory. So this was again a great opportunity, great partnership, and this will go to the museum at the City of St. Catharines with a note as well. So Another demonstration of the inclusivity of the Indigenous in our community, in our games. As well, I just want to say congratulations to Keaton Zavitz and Mitchell Armstrong. They won the gold medal at the World Juniors Lacrosse. Two St. Catharines residents were on Team Canada. And Mitchell Armstrong also was a part of the Sutherland Cup winning Falcons. So in 1 year, he won the Sutherland Cup and also the gold medal for Team Canada at lacrosse. Sounds like someone would be up for Male Athlete of the Year maybe next year for that achievement. As well, I just want to say thank you to the different sports that wrapped up this weekend. The Grantham Optimists wrapped up, the St. Catharines Ladies Softball, Port Weller Soccer, just to name a few. These were wrapping up their summer-long sports events, and it was great to see all the players, coaches, and volunteers coming together, being able to be at some of these weekend events where the championships were being played, and seeing all the smiles on the kids' faces. I want to say special thanks to the volunteers and coaches for putting in so many hours to making sure that kids have an ability to play sports in our community. Also, congratulations to Stephanie Smith for winning the Buddy Scholarship, the Best Buddies Scholarship at Brock University, and this is for international young leaders. And congratulations to Stephanie for that recognition. As well, just want to say thank you to our staff for all the work that they've done to upgrade the 2,030 meters of brand new trails and 540 meters of upgrades throughout the city. Special thanks to MP Biddle and MPP Oosterhoff and the provincial government for the investments as part of the Invest Canada plan. We also celebrated the enhancements at Rennie Park and the Lakeside Waterfront Trail, as well as John Page Fairview Park, and as well as Pearson Park. And all these went into creating more active transportation pathways through our community for all abilities. Special thanks to Michelle Saunders, who is the co-chair on the Accessibility Advisory Committee, for joining us on Friday to demonstrate the importance of these active transportation routes for people of all abilities in our community. As well, vote by mail. The city is now accepting applications for vote by mail for the 2022 municipal and school board election. The alternative method of voting provides electors the opportunity to cast their vote in an accessible, convenient way without physically attending a voting location. Vote by mail packages will include the voting instructions and declaration form, an official ballot, a white ballot secrecy envelope, and a yellow prepaid return to envelope. And once an elector request has been received by a vote by mail package, the request will be processed and the packages must be mailed back. Will be mailed by late September by regular mail, and they must be returned to the city by October 24th. Vote by mail information can be found on our website, and encouraging all residents who are interested to check out the website for that. August 31st is International Overdose Awareness Day. It's a campaign to end overdose and remember that without stigma, those who have died, and acknowledge the grief of the family and friends left behind. We have an event taking place at City Hall starting at 5 o'clock on the 31st, and we'll be walking to Silver Spire in recognition for those who have passed away in our community of overdoses. As well, September 1st is a Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. It's the kickoff, and we'll be raising a flag, and you'll see yellow ribbons on the front of City Hall in recognition of angels and warriors with childhood cancer. And the Greek Festival is back September 2nd to the 4th at the Greek Community Center on Niagara Street. And it's an amazing opportunity for the long weekend to celebrate Greek heritage in our community. The block party is on September 3rd, downtown St. Catharines, 3 different venues across the downtown. It's closing of streets, and there's going to be music happening Saturday, September 3rd, 2 p.m. to 11 p.m., and this is free for all ages. Don't forget to bring your own chair for outdoor entertainment, and a lot of shopping and dining in our downtown restaurants. As well, Merit Labor Day Parade and Festival takes place this long weekend on Labor Day weekend. Fun kicks off on Friday and continues all weekend with the final parade on Labor Day Monday. Thank you to the Merit Lions for all your work in organizing this event as well. Celebration of Nations is coming up on September 9th and 10th. Thank you to the organizing team, Michelle Elise Burnett and Tim Johnson, and the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre and volunteers. It is an amazing weekend of Indigenous learning, culture, celebration, music, arts, and it's a wonderful way to come together and join in with our Indigenous community. So check out the Celebration of Nations website. And just final one, I know a number of us shared memories this past week of Peter Shea, a longtime musician in our community who passed away, unfortunately, at a very young age of 50. He was an outstanding musician, founder of the TD Niagara Jazz Festival with his wife, Juliette Dunn. He passed away after a courageous battle with cancer. Born and raised in St. Catharines, he loved his music. So many tributes have been coming out about Peter and all the different ways that he touched so many different lives with the music that he played. And our thoughts are with Juliette and those in the music community who are mourning this very special person. As well, I just want to acknowledge the passing of Chuck Page, who was a World War II veteran from our community, and he passed away at the age of 102. 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to join Chuck on one of his daily walks as he worked his way through 100 walks to raise money for the Hotel Dieu Shaver Rehabilitation Center before he turned 100. He achieved that task. Learned a lot about him during that walk, and I just want to say on behalf of our community, thank you to Chuck for his service to our country and our community. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the clerk to go through the adoption of the agenda.
There's been one item of additional correspondence that's been placed in Council's Sugar Sync folder, and it's a memo from the Director of Planning and Building Services regarding additional correspondence for 19 Melody Trail. And there's one amendment to tonight's agenda. Staff have advised that bylaw D has been pulled from consideration.
Okay, can I have a mover to move the agenda? Councillor McPherson and seconded by Councillor Sorrento. All in favor? Okay, adoption of the minutes. A motion to adopt the minutes. I have Councillor Harris, seconded by Councillor Phillips. Any changes to the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Okay, that's carried. And conflicts of interest, we do have a few today. Councillor Littleton, conflict on 7.3.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. I have a conflict with 7.3 because I am an owner of rental properties.
Thank you. And Councillor Dodge, you have a conflict 7.2.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I do. I'm within the, I guess, the planning district of 7.2 on Melody Trail. I live in that circle.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other conflicts? Okay, see no other conflicts. Move to consent. And I need a motion to move the consent agenda. Councillor McPherson, seconded by Councillor Littleton. No, we got to read the consent items first. Sorry, to the clerk.
Today's consent agenda includes item 6.1, Planning and Building Services, update to the St. Catharines Register for non-designated cultural heritage properties, and item 6.2, Legal and Clerk Services, Council Correspondence. Councillor McPherson.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Sensik.
Yes.
And that's carried.
Okay, so we do have some presenters who are going to be presenting as part of the public meeting, so I just want to read the declaration to all presenters. Council chambers in all municipalities in our country represent the seat of local democracy. The many acts that govern us understand the necessity of the collective voice when decisions are being made to grow our spaces, pass our bylaws, and seek opinions into very complex issues, ensuring safe places for all in our public discourse. We recognize the right of the majority to decide, the minority to be heard, the public to have an opportunity to participate, and all participants to be treated with courtesy and respect. It is imperative that elected officials, citizens, and staff have input, and it is paramount that we listen to one another and question one another, but we do so in an understanding in a way that we never undermines any person's abilities or their dignities in our chamber. We respect the right for everyone to have an opinion and remind the audience views of the public do not always reflect those of the corporation of the City of St. Catharines. So we have a couple planning meetings. The first one is 7.1, Planning and Building Services, an amendment to the official plan and zoning bylaw 213-283, 89 Page Street, 224 Niagara Street. The purpose of this public meeting is to ensure that sufficient information is available to the public to understand the proposed plan and zoning bylaw amendment regarding these two addresses, 89 Page Street, 124 Niagara Street, to provide the public with an opportunity for input. Staff have held an open house and prior to the application, the public meeting will proceed as follows. Natasha McDonald, Planner 1, Planning and Building Services, will explain the proposal. Members of the public were provided with options to submit written correspondence. No items of correspondence were received, and public had an opportunity to speak on the proposal. As of today, no one has registered to speak as well. So, with that, council will have an opportunity to ask the agent for applications if there are any questions, and the public meeting will be closed, and council will make a decision. So now I'm going to turn it over to Natasha McDonald to make her presentation. Welcome to council, Ms. Natasha McDonald.
Thank you, Mayor Senzik. I'll just share my presentation and away we go. So hello everyone, and thank you for joining the public meeting for the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications at 89 Page Street and 124 Niagara Street. My name is Natasha McDonald, Planner 1 with the City of St. Catharines, and I have been working on this file since it was submitted earlier this year. The purpose of the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications is to facilitate the construction of an accessory structure, being a detached garage, to serve the existing mixed-use building at 124 Niagara Street. The proposed accessory structure will be located in the rear yard of 124 Niagara Street on lands that are currently part of the abutting property 89 Page Street. A future boundary adjustment application will be required to sever this 172 square meter area from 89 Page Street and merge with 124 Niagara Street. The zoning bylaw requires that accessory structures be located on lands that are zoned the same as the principal use. Therefore, a zoning bylaw amendment is required to rezone the rear portion of 89 Page Street to M1, medium density mixed use, to match the M1 zoning of 124 Niagara Street. An official plan amendment is also required to redesignate this area to mixed use so that it matches the mixed use designation of 124 Niagara Street. The proposal is also to rezone the retained lot at 89 Page Street to address two zoning deficiencies that will be a result of the future boundary adjustment. The proposal will rezone the property to R3-169 to allow an increased lot area and driveway coverage for the existing detached dwelling. The current uses of the detached dwelling at 89 Page Street and the mixed-use building at 124 Niagara Street are not proposed to change as part of this application. Here we have the location of 89 Page Street and 124 Niagara Street, which are located between Welland Avenue and the QEW, east of Geneva Street. The map shows the rear portion of 89 Page Street, which will be severed from 89 Page and merge with 124 Niagara Street. The applications propose to redesignate and rezone this area so that it matches the mixed-use designation and zoning of 124 Niagara Street. The map also shows the retained lot at 89 Page Street, which will be rezoned to R3-169 as part of these applications. Here we have the existing detached dwelling at 89 Page Street. The surrounding land uses to 89 Page Street include low-rise residential dwellings, commercial, and mixed-use buildings. And here we have the existing mixed-use building at 124 Niagara Street with one commercial unit used as an office and one residential unit above. The proposed attached garage will be located in the rear yard. The surrounding land uses of 124 Niagara Street include low-rise mixed-use and commercial buildings and low-rise residential dwellings. Shown here is the proposed site plan for the proposal. So highlighted in green is the rear portion of 89 Page Street to be rezoned M1, redesignated mixed use, and merged with 124 Niagara Street through a future boundary adjustment. The proposed detached garage will be located within this area. Highlighted in orange is the retained lot at 89 Page Street to be rezoned R3-169. Highlighted in blue is 124 Niagara Street, and highlighted in yellow are road widenings to be taken by the city and region as part of the future boundary adjustment. Shown here is the proposed elevations for the detached garage to be constructed in the rear yard of 124 Niagara Street. Now, the next few slides are a summary of the staff recommendation report for these applications. Staff have reviewed this application against provincial land use plans and policies, being the provincial policy statement and growth plan, and found that the applications are consistent with provincial policy. Staff have also reviewed the applications against regional land use policy, being the Niagara Regional Official Plan, and found that the applications are in keeping with regional policy. Now we're moving on to the city's official plan, or Garden City Plan, which designates 89 Page Street as neighborhood residential and 124 Niagara Street as mixed use on Schedule D1 of the Garden City Plan. This application proposes to redesignate the rear portion of 89 Page Street from neighborhood residential to mixed use on Schedule D1 to match the rest of 124 Niagara Street. The lands at 89 Page Street are further designated medium density residential, and the lands at 124 Niagara Street are further designated mixed use on Schedule E5. This application proposes to redesignate the rear portion of 89 Page Street from medium density residential to mixed use on Schedule E5 to match the rest of 124 Niagara Street. Staff have reviewed the application against Section 16.1 of the Garden City Plan, which outlines principal policies for evaluating official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications. Staff have found that the applications meet city policy. Now, in terms of zoning, 89 Page Street is zoned R3, medium density residential, and 124 Niagara Street is zoned M1, medium density mixed use. The R3 zone permits a range of residential uses, and the M1 zone permits a range of uses, including residential, commercial, and office uses. The proposal will rezone the rear portion of 89 Page Street from R3 to M1, and the proposal will rezone the retained lot at 89 Page Street from R3 to R3-169. Special Provision 169 for 89 Page Street is to address the site-specific zoning provisions that will occur following the future boundary adjustment. The requested provisions include an increase to the maximum lot area from 370 square meters to 492 square meters for a detached dwelling in an R3 zone, as well as an increase in the maximum overall parking area coverage from 20% to 24% for the existing driveway. The applications were circulated to all appropriate city departments and external agencies, and no objections were received. Staff also note that there were no objections to the future boundary adjustment at this time. A public open house was held on June 16th, 2022, where there were no participants or written correspondence received, and staff have also not received any correspondence leading up to this public meeting. In conclusion, it is staff's recommendation that council approve the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendments. The proposal is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan and regional official plan. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. McDonald, for the presentation. The applicant is here, but I don't think they have, they're only going to take questions if there's questions of staff, of council. I don't see any questions of council, so I'm just going to take a moment to close the public meeting. And a motion to close the public meeting. I have Councillor Garcia, do you have your hand up for a question of the applicant?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to ask the planner a question if I could.
So that'll be after we close the public meeting part, and then we'll have the questions of the councillor.
Thank you.
Okay, so to close the public meeting, Councillor Sorrento, seconded by Councillor Littleton. All in favor of closing the public meeting? Okay, the public meeting is now closed. Okay, now Councillor Garcia, questions of council.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excellent presentation, Ms. McDonald. Thank you very much. I just wanted to make sure I understood why does the retained portion of 89 Page have to be rezoned to that special designation, because there's already a residential dwelling there, if I understand it, right?
Through the mayor to Councillor Garcia, the reason for the special provision on the retained lot of 89 Page Street is because the future boundary adjustment, which will take place, will result in two zoning deficiencies. And the two zoning deficiencies are related to the lot area. So although there's an existing dwelling there, the lot area for the existing detached dwelling is still oversized than what the R3 zone permits for a detached dwelling, as well as the parking area for the driveway.
Okay, thank you. I understand.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia. Any other further questions? Okay, seeing no further questions, a motion to move the staff recommendation, Councillor McPherson, and seconded by Councillor Littleton. And I will then go to the clerk to call the question.
Councillor McPherson?
Yes.
Councillor Littleton?
Yes.
Councillor Porter?
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento?
Yes.
Councillor Williamson?
Yes.
Councillor Dodge?
Yes.
Councillor Garcia?
Yes?
Councillor Harris?
Yes.
Councillor Kushner?
Yes.
Counselor Miller,
Yes.
and Counselor Phillips,
Yes.
and then Mayor Sensick,
Yes.
and that's carried.
Okay, so that public meeting is closed, and we now move to 7.2, which is Planning Building Services, and this is related to 19 Melody Trail. The purpose of this public meeting is to ensure that sufficient information is available for the public to understand the proposed zoning bylaw amendment regarding 19 Melody Trail, and to provide the public with an opportunity for input before council's decision. Staff have held an open house and prepared a report on the application, which we'll soon hear from. The public meeting will proceed as follows. Charlotte McEwen, Planner 1 from the city, will explain the proposal. Members of the public were provided options to submit written correspondence, which they have. Items have been received and added to council's folders. The public will have an opportunity to speak on the proposal, and as of today, we have 3 speakers. Franco Gigoni and Leif Kretz and Sol Paeski, and they'll be presenting in that order. If a person does not make an oral or written submission prior to the council decision, that person is not entitled to an appeal. To appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal, may not be added as a party to the hearing of any other appeals without the permission of the tribunal. The agent is also here representing the owner of the property, William Highcoop, and he's from Upper Canada Planning. He'll be present as well. We will then close the public meeting after questions of the delegates, and then council will make a decision as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Planner 1, Charlotte McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. The second public meeting this evening is regarding an application for zoning bylaw amendment for 19 Melody Trail. The applicant would like to rezone the lands to permit a detached dwelling to be constructed. They request to realign the natural area zone boundary, zone the remainder of the site as low-density residential traditional neighborhood, or R2, and apply a special provision to the lands to permit an increased maximum lot area for a detached dwelling. The lands are located on the north side of Melody Trail, west of Arthur Street. The property is a large, roughly rectangular lot with an area of 830 square meters and an 18.3 meter frontage along Melody Trail. The subject property shown here currently does not contain any buildings and is primarily wooded with a slope towards the ravine at the rear. There's a ravine north of the property. It's also mostly treed, so there was not much opportunity for great photography, but looks like this. To the east, there is a private road development of townhouse dwellings, and a residential neighborhood backs onto Melody Trail to the south across from the lot. And to the west, the wooded area continues to the west, and then there's a dwelling at 5 Melody accessed by the driveway seen in this picture on the right. On the left is the entrance to Cherry Road Park. This site plan shows a conceptual building footprint for a detached dwelling on the site. It's shown to demonstrate compliance with all the setbacks of the proposed residential R2 zone. The stable top of bank labeled at the back of the site is the proposed location of the new G1 zone boundary. The property is located within a settlement area under the provincial policy statement and the built-up area under the growth plan. The submitted application has evaluated the natural features on and adjacent to the site, and no negative impacts are anticipated to these features, and the proposal is consistent with provincial policies. The property contains natural features identified as core natural heritage system in the regional official plan. They are listed here. An environmental impact study was submitted and reviewed by regional staff. The region has accepted the findings of the EIS that the G1 boundary may be revised to more accurately follow the existing natural features by following the stable top of the bank. They've requested that additional zoning provisions be added to the property to ensure the continued protection of the natural features, and those provisions will be discussed in more detail shortly. The city's official plan designates the property natural areas on Schedule D1 and also designates it as natural areas on Schedule E2. This designation does not permit development. It is designated natural area to protect the significant natural features associated with the creek to the rear, and this being the significant woodland and the ravine slope. The official plan does not require amendment in cases where minor boundary adjustments are made to the natural area boundary based on more accurate mapping. The submitted EIS provides more accurate mapping, determines that the significant woodland and significant slope are located within the rear portion of the property, and that the remainder of the site is primarily non-native species, and the removal of this portion of the woodlot would not negatively impact the forest interior. Therefore, the proposal is in keeping with the official plan policies. The lands are currently zoned entirely conservation/natural area, or G1, which does not permit any development on the property. And the proposed zoning is shown here with a revised G1 zone boundary, and the rest of the site zoned R2, similar to nearby residential properties to the northeast and the west. The requested special provision to permit an increased maximum lot area, which is shown as special provision 170 here. Additional zoning provisions requested by the region have also been included in special provision 170, which will be outlined in just a moment. Regarding the proposed location of the G1 boundary, the submitted environmental impact study was prepared to determine the accurate location of the natural features. The proposed rezoning does not compromise the preservation or environmental integrity of the natural areas. The EIS has been reviewed by the region, the NPCA, and the city's Community Recreation and Culture Services Department. There have been no objections to the conclusions of the EIS to realign the G1 boundary to follow the stable top of bank, and the region has requested that special zoning provisions be applied to ensure protection of the slope and woodland. They've requested a 15-meter setback from the physical top of bank and a landscape buffer of at least 5 meters along the edge of the physical top of bank. The proposed special provision 170 is outlined here. It includes a maximum lot area of 830 meters for a detached dwelling, a 6.4 meter setback from the new G1 zone boundary, which would achieve an overall 15-meter setback from the physical top of bank, and a landscape buffer within the G1 boundary. To illustrate these provisions further, this image shows the property in purple, and the proposed G1 boundary is identified in green. The proposed lot area includes both the residential and green space portions of the land. So while a single dwelling would be less than the target density for a low density property of this size, it does represent an intensification of an underutilized parcel, and given the natural area context and the location of this site at the end of a local road, permitting a single dwelling on the lot of this size represents an appropriately gentle increase in density, and staff are supportive of the increase in lot area. The region has recommended a 15-meter setback from the physical top of bank, which is the physical top of bank is shown in dark green here, and that 15-meter setback is illustrated approximately on this slide. This setback is most enforceable if it's applied from the new zone boundary, which is shown in the lighter green line, which follows the stable top of bank, which here would mean a 6.4 meter setback from that stable top of bank, and that is what the staff have recommended. The region has also requested at least 5 meters of landscape buffer along that dark green physical top of bank. Given that no development is permitted within the G1 zone here, it's considered most appropriate to require the buffer to cover the entirety of the G1 zone, which is highlighted here in green. The application was circulated to all appropriate departments and agencies, and no objections were received. A public open house was held in May, and there were 10 attendees. Written comments were received from 9 members of the public, some of whom also attended the open house. So overall, 13 people participated across 8 households. 2 expressed support for the application. Others had questions and some concerns, which I'll summarize now. There is concern that there may be negative impacts from lot drainage if a house is built at 19 Melody. Staff note that a grading plan will be required through the building permit application review process and must be approved by the city's engineering staff prior to any construction here. And there are no specific concerns with drainage on this lot. One resident has requested that a tree identified on the tree preservation plan as number 340 be removed instead of preserved as it's identified as being. The tree is located on a property line between 19 Melody and the adjacent townhouse development and can only be removed with the permission of both owners. Staff don't specifically require the tree to be kept, so this matter would be with the landowners to resolve. There's concern that this would constitute a loss of natural habitat for animals in the area. As noted previously, the environmental impact study has identified the exact location of the significant natural features, the woodland and the slope, and found that the majority of the lot contains invasive species. There's no impact on the significant natural features. There is a resident in the nearby townhouse who has requested that the proposed building footprint be set back a few meters further so they may maintain a view they currently have from their deck, as illustrated here. The builder of any dwelling at 19 Melody could choose to set back the house further than it is shown here. However, an increased front yard setback is not considered necessary for the development to be compatible and therefore doesn't form part of the staff recommendation special provision. Ravine stability was also raised as a concern. NPCA staff have reviewed a slope stability assessment for a single family dwelling on this property. There have been no concerns with the proposed rezoning and the overall stability of the ravine, provided that the G1 boundary follows the stable top of bank as has been proposed and recommended. There was concern that should this application be approved, it will set a precedent for the 4 lots to the west of this property to also be rezoned for residential development. However, all applications are considered entirely on their own merits and site-specific context. The decision being made about 19 Melody Trail would have no bearing on any other adjacent or at G1 lands in the city. There's concern that there would be a need to extend services and that this will cost the city money. There are services available in front of the development as confirmed by city engineers, and any costs to connect to these services will be borne by the owner. The residents of 5 Melody Trail, located a few lots to the west of the subject property, are concerned that the development could compromise the access to their lot, which is the driveway seen here on the right, which is partly located on the city's right-of-way and that they pay annually to have access to. The access to 5 Melody Trail does not cross on the actual property of 19 Melody Trail and would not be impeded by any development on 19 Melody Trail. There's also concern that construction at 19 Melody Trail could impact groundwater quality and impact a well also located at that property, 5 Melody Trail, that the residents rely on for water. There's no concern from the city or regional engineering staff that the well would be impacted by development at 19 Melody Trail, and this is not considered something that would happen. So in summary, staff recommend that council approve the application as outlined in the staff recommendation, as it's consistent with provincial policy, the regional official plan, and the Garden City plan. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. McEwen, for the presentation. We now have some presenters from the public who would like to present. First up is Franco Gigoni, and Franco, welcome to council, and looking forward to hearing your remarks.
Thank you for giving me these few minutes. My only concern is that once this area is approved for building and the G1 is changed, it's proven in the past that people will use it as a precedent, and council will not have anything, not a leg to stand on, but to approve the other lots to be built on. So, in going with what the province is trying to do with conservation areas to maintain them, I think the city of St. Catharines in this particular site is not following the advocacy of the province. I know people have purchased this property for future development, but the people that have purchased houses around them, including ourselves, we purchased our properties knowing that there was a conservation area and it was to be maintained. So I'm afraid that council will be put in a position that by allowing this and setting this precedent, it's going to impact the rest of Melody Trail. And if we look further down, 10 years, 15 years from now, we'll eventually eliminate the whole entrance to Melody Trail, which leads to the parkland in behind. So that's my main concern. I know it was just said that it will not impact the decision on the future lots that are available, but I can't see a guarantee coming from City Council on that. And if you do go ahead and allow this site to be changed, it's definitely gonna, number one, reduce our conservation area, which we have to maintain in this province. And secondly, set a major precedent, which town council will not have a leg to stand on. I appreciate it if you would take that into an account and try and preserve our conservation area. As we can see in the city, more lots with single dwellings are being torn down and 3 dwellings are put in its place. Our infrastructure was not designed for that. I know development is in our sight for tax purposes, but we have to take a little more care of the existing dwellings and the people that purchased the original homes. This site specifically is impacting G1, and it was never to be built on. Never mind the fact that if it was just a small portion that they were asking, maybe I would have to say okay, but you're asking almost a double lot size and double impacting the G1 area. I hope you take this into consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Any questions of council to the presenter? Okay, seeing no questions of the presenter. Thank you very much for those comments and for us to take into consideration that perspective. And next we go to Mr. Leif Kretz. Leif Kretz.
Thank you. It's neither Mr. nor Ms. I'm non-biased. I wish to speak on the proposed development for 19 Melody Trail, which is zoned as a conservation natural area G1 protected land. The amendments that are requested to the official city plan include rezoning the majority of this land for a new property build, which will effectively destroy the ability to conserve and protect said land. Generally speaking, if requests to use ecologically protected land can be submitted at any time, then it falls on local citizens to protect spaces that the city has demarcated as conservation natural areas. So citizens have to be constantly vigilant about protecting parcels of land. Citizens who already have full-time jobs, families, commitments, significant obligations outside this extra advocacy work to ensure what has been marked as by the city as needing conservation continues to be treated as an area needing conservation. Citizens themselves are being asked to take on this responsibility rather than the designation from the city serving as a concrete designation that ensures lands meriting conservation are conserved. I would think that the city would work to protect and honor existing ecological commitments, particularly given the findings of the most recent IPCC report, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Online, the city recognizes, quote, "At the City of St. Catharines, we recognize that we have a role to play in combating human-driven climate change." In 2019, City Council declared a climate emergency. Further reducing existing protected green spaces is not consistent with combating human-driven climate change. The health and welfare of future generations is sacrificed when diverse animals, trees, and plants are destroyed, when conserved lands in St. Catharines decrease, which is what the current proposal is asking. The proposed rezoning, which is a decrease of ecologically protected areas rather than an increase of ecologically protected areas, is not consistent with protecting future and current generations from climate change harms. The IPCC report clearly identifies increasing climate harms for future generations as the natural world continues to be eroded by human behaviors. Forested areas act as carbon sinks that help mitigate the impacts of human-generated climate change. As air quality issues increase, we should be all the more motivated to protect what little green spaces we have left, which help make the air more breathable. Local residents have expressed concerns about the wider ecological impact the proposal will have on all surrounding areas, rather than the narrower view presented at the last meeting by the geotechnical engineer hired by those who wish to build on conserved lands. Ecosystems can only be protected when they're protected at the ecosystem level. When looking at a parcel of land, you are only looking at mathematical denotations of the space that would be used, not at the complex ecosystemic functions and the variety of complex non-human beings creating an ecological system that helps to sustain life. If protected lands are always subjected to not being protected if local citizens aren't schooling themselves in what is required for protection and doing the extra work, means that ecologically protected lands will continue to be denigrated, a sliver at a time. The reason I spent 5 hours developing a response is because I grew up walking Melody Trail, and what is proposed is more land lost for yet another house. Lots of residents don't have 5 hours. When a mature tree is killed by cutting it down, for example, a 100-year-old tree, If you plant a new 1-year-old tree of the same species, and it takes 100 years for that tree to have the same ability to act as a carbon sink. Each mature tree we cut in the city decreases air quality and cannot be replaced, in some cases for a century. So you cannot get back those benefits for up to 100 years. If you contend removing a small bit of conserved land won't impact the wider ecological community, you effectively make that ecological community smaller. It's death by 1,000 cuts. There are 2 red-tailed hawks and an owl that live in this particular ecosystem. Disrupting ecosystems, having huge earth movers shaking the ground, noise pollution, habitat destruction, and so on will impact these non-human animals. All existing forests need protection, direly need protection, including small forested areas. We in St. Catharines market ourselves as the Garden City, so this would be particularly important if that marketing is meant to indicate actual practices. It was zoned as conservation for excellent reasons, and those reasons haven't changed. Indeed, the need for ecologically protected spaces has increased. Trends regarding zoning and the loss of ecologically protected areas should be taken into consideration. It was requested at the last meeting that residents organize themselves if they wish to present their own concerns at tonight's meeting, in the interest of time, in such a way that each individual person only gets to voice one concern each. I would contend this request decreases the ability for citizens to share the type of concerns they have as individuals, as well as the ability for City Council to feel the force of numerous residents sharing a similar concern, rather than diluting the fact that many people are concerned about the same things. Multiple voices are needed for the weight of the concerns articulated to be felt. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for your presentation. Any questions of the speaker? I'm not seeing any hands at this point in time. Okay, thank you very much for your Oh, Councillor Williamson, sorry, I didn't see your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Leaf. The report suggests that there's invasive species here. What would you say to that?
The invasive species discussed were trees. There's really interesting arguments about what constitutes an invasive species, when it stops being seen as an invasive species because it's been in that area for so long and has been integrated. So that's how I would respond to that.
Thank you. But would you suggest that there's also native species there as well?
I myself don't have a copy of the plan and where different trees are and the different varieties of each of the trees.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any more questions of the presenter? Okay, seeing no more further questions, thank you very much for your presentation. We now go on to Sol Payeski. I think I'm saying it right. I apologize if I'm not saying it right. Sol Payeski. I think I saw you on the screen. There you are. There you are. Just got to unmute. Just got to hit the unmute button. One more time. You can just got to unmute. There you go. There you go. Perfect.
All right. Okay. It's Piasecki, by the way.
Piasecki.
Yes.
That was easy to say. Piasecki.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
I too like trees, so I stand up for trees. So I think they're beautiful. I'll just make this short over here. First of all, I don't know if you can actually see this, but anyways, this map over here, it's the south. It's corner of the mentioned property. I do think that it actually the driveway does impinge on our driveway, and that driveway we pay $600 a year for the right of use for that driveway, and I think this is always going to be always going to have a negative impact on our coming and going from our house. So as far as I can see on the map, that this is very close to our driveway, if not on it. The other thing is the tumultuous time when the construction equipment is going to come in. They're going to be there for about 2 months, and it's going to have a negative impact on our living over here. But it's not that it's just that it's going to be bad for us to come in and out, going around heavy equipment and trucks and whatever. So it's not going to be not going to be a nice time for us. And it's just it. And the other thing is, it's about the driveway itself. We're just going to have a hard time just even when the house is up and the driveway is up. It's just we're in case they have like guests or something like that, and they have to park somewhere, and it's just gonna be a hard time for us to get around. So I think it's just a bad idea unless they bring the house, they set the house back a number of meters, and it's just gonna be bad for us. So that's all I wanted to see it.
Okay, no, I appreciate the perspective, and I'm sure staff will be able to respond to some of those questions as well in terms of the impact on parking on that space. And so I think you've left us with some good questions to ask as well. Any questions of the presenter? Okay, seeing no further questions of the presenter, I'd like to thank all three presenters for making their delegations here tonight. They've all brought up very salient points as part of their presentation, and it's given us lots to think about. The next presenter is William Hycoop, and he is the planner for Upper Canada Planning and Engineering, and he's representing the owner of the property, so we'll hear from him as well. Mr. Hycoop, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a brief presentation I'd like to share with everyone, and I will do that now. Can you all see that okay?
Yep.
Thanks for having me tonight, Mr. Mayor. As indicated, my name is William Hycoop. I'm a planner with Upper Canada Consultants, representing the owner of the subject lands this evening. I'm here to present the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. As indicated through Charlotte's presentation, I will be doubling up on a little bit of the information and expanding upon it. The subject property fronts onto Melody Trail and is located on the west side of Arthur Street. The lands are directly adjacent to the existing residential condominium to the east. Beamer Creek is located to the north. An existing dwelling at 5 Melody Trail and the waterfront trail access are located to the west. Melody Trail and then the dwellings fronting Cherry Road are to the south. The existing lot was actually created in the early 1900s and has been in family ownership since 1938 when they immigrated into the country. Through the 2013 zoning bylaw that comprehensively rezoned the entire city, ended up rezoning this subject property to the G1 or Conservation Natural Area Zone without the owner's specific knowledge. So the proposed zoning amendment in front of you this evening is to address that rezoning. So as part of this process, a number of studies were completed in order to assess the subject lands and ensure that the environmental features were appropriately reviewed and studied before concluding the lands could in fact support a residential use. So due to the proximity of the core woodlot and the fish habitat in Beamer Creek, an environmental impact study was completed. It assessed the property and the surrounding watercourse. The study concludes that the invasive species thicket was found at the front of the property, whereas the core woodlot species and larger woodlot are found to the rear. So the invasive species are predominantly Manitoba maples and green ash trees, whereas there is a sugar maple and oak core wooded area to the rear of the property. So due to the proximity of the Beamer Creek, the geotechnical study was completed. It identifies the stable top of slope and concludes the watercourse location and establishes a setback that is appropriate for a dwelling. And then lastly, due to the existing vegetation, a tree inventory preservation plan was completed. an inventory of the existing trees on site to confirm there is no species at risk, and to provide tree protection requirements, including fencing, hoarding fencing, silt fencing, through any future construction process. All of these submitted studies and reports prepared for the application confirm the proposal meets the required city, regional, and NPCA policies regarding environmental protection and development of land adjacent to nearby natural heritage features. Based on the studies completed, the zoning bylaw amendment would see the subject property updated with the R2-170 zoning. So you can see that in the schedule here, that line differentiating between the G1 and the R2-170 is the stable top of slope line, which is the highest constraint of those environmental constraints. The site-specific zoning provisions would include the increase of maximum lot area, a 6.4 meter setback from the G1 area, which is reflective of a 15 meter setback from the physical top of slope. And lastly, that the G1 zoned area be maintained as a landscape buffer. This provides for long-term protection of the environmental area without future encroachment into the G1 area. As further shown on our tree inventory preservation plan, there are existing trees within that area already that we are hoping to preserve and have identified for that as part of this process. So in the result, these changes would allow for a residential use. The envelope shown on these drawings are just reflective of the zoning setbacks of the R2 zone. At this time, an architectural design has not been completed. So please keep in mind that this is a maximum envelope, and if this is approved, an architectural design would commence that would certainly look to play within the lines of the zone parameters. So just to summarize and provide some information as it relates to the core natural heritage area, the proposed dwelling is 26.73 meters, or approximately 87 feet away from the existing watercourse. The proposed dwelling is 8.9 meters, or about 29 feet from the stable top of bank, which again is that nearest environmental constraint. So as you can see here in the image, I've shown the existing watercourse in the blue line, the significant woodlot limit in the green line, and the stable top of slope in the brown line. The dwelling that is proposed is significantly set back to provide an adequate rear yard amenity area for this. In conclusion, the proposed zoning bylaw amendment facilitates the protection of the existing woodland, valley land, and fish habitat associated with the Beamer Creek Conservation Area, while allowing appropriate development of a single attached dwelling. So thank you for your time this evening, and I'm certainly here to answer any questions council may have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hykoop. So any questions of the applicant? Okay, seeing no questions of the applicant, Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure if, well, I'm going to ask you first, and perhaps you can answer this question. If not, I'll ask it to our city staff. So when you were working through this application, the region was likely going through its official plan amendments. So how would this compare when we're talking about the setbacks from like certain sensitive areas and the woodlots? How do the setbacks that you reviewed under the region's official plan, old official plan, compared to the new official plan? Do you think there's a big difference, or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. So the existing application was done under the old regional official plan policies. So there's certainly a minor difference. The proposed, what the region has really commented on through this process is they've asked for a 15-meter setback from the physical top of slope. So in my estimation, I can't speak for the region, but they would usually ask for a 10-meter setback from the natural heritage area. In this instance, they've asked for a 15-meter setback. So I feel that we've gone over and above what the regional requirements are to address those policies.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Garcia?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Highcup, just wanted to confirm, so based on your studies, you believe that the significant woodland and wooded area is all going to be kept, and it will be beyond the back of the dwelling, and that area will be fenced off. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Garcia. Yes, that is correct. We have completed an environmental impact study by Beacon Environmental, and they have concluded that all the invasive species are at the front of the property and that the core natural heritage area is at the rear. So we completed a tree inventory preservation plan that is looking to preserve a fairly large Norway maple that is actually found out just at that edge. So we're proposing to put up significant hoarding fencing and protect those trees along that stable top of slope and in that core natural heritage area.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia. Councillor Phillips?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What is the proposed structure going to be like? You indicated it has are they talking about a two-story house? Or are they talking about a bungalow? Exactly. What's your feeling about this? I'm talking with your clients.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so we're not looking to change the existing zoning height, and they permit two-story dwellings. At this point in time, the owners owned these lands for quite some time. It doesn't have short-term building plans. They are looking to do something in the near future, but I can't comment on whether it would be a bungalow.
Okay, and I know the area extremely well. I think it was the first area I visited many years ago as a councillor, which is a concern there. Beamer Creek is eroding badly, especially on the south side, right around where this property is. Now I know it's set back quite a distance, but have you any idea how much it has eroded, say within the last number of years, last 5-10 years? Have you, in your studies, were you aware of that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. Yes, we actually started looking at this property back in 2018 and started the first environmental impact studies at that point in time. The geotechnical study was done a little bit more recently, but I feel that we've been looking at this property for years at this point and understand it very well. I would add one thing that in a lot of instances when you do these geotechnical reports, the physical and stable top of slope are usually the same thing. In this instance, there's about an 8 or a 9 meter gap from the stable top of slope to the physical top of slope. So the geotechnical engineer has taken into account a 25 to 30 foot buffer from the physical peak of when you're standing on the site where it looks like the slope starts to go down. There's another 25 to 30 feet of space before that slope becomes stable. So we feel that we've set this G1 boundary line based on that stable top of slope, and we've done so in a way that it accommodates for any changing, evolving stream geomorphology or anything like that. We're very aware that as time goes on, flows go through creeks and water courses, and they tend to erode on one side or the other depending on where that flow is hitting. So I feel like we have a really good understanding and have placed the building envelope in an appropriate location to ensure that we don't have erosion issues in the future. The placement of the proposed dwelling is actually well beyond some of the surrounding existing dwellings and they're set back to that creek area. So I feel like we've done a good job doing that.
That is a concern. Your client owns down to the edge of the creek?
Not quite. They're about 10 or 15 feet away from the edge of the existing water course, like where the water travels.
So does the person who lives across the creek, that person owns both sides of the creek, which is the normal situation along there?
Not entirely. I believe my client's land has part of the slope going down to the creek. But yes, the basin of the water course, if you want to call it that, is owned by the owner fronting on Jarrow Road.
Right, which is a problem. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Okay, seeing no other further questions of council, I'm going to close the public meeting. A motion to close the public meeting. Councillor Sorrento, seconded by Councillor Miller. All in favor of closing the public meeting. The public meeting is now closed, and we will now consider the recommendation. Any questions of staff on this this call? Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the planner, this conservation zoning, what rules apply to it in terms of maintenance of the woodlot, the vegetation that's there? The people who bought the townhouses bought on beside conservation area, and I'd like to be clear on what that means.
Through the mayor to the councillor, the G1 zone dictates what could or could not be developed. In general, nothing can really be developed, but it does allow things such as boat ramps, picnic areas and shelters. It doesn't entirely require protection. And there may be provincial and regional policies related to protection of significant species, significant woodlot, but the actual zone itself doesn't require maintenance and protection of the ecosystem that exists on the property. That's not a zoning. That's not the role of zoning.
The name conservation sounds like it would have some meaning and some weight, but in reality, the owner could the owner come in and just clear cut the woodlot since we don't have a private tree bylaw?
Through the mayor to the councillor, my understanding would be that unless there's a significant or endangered species or a portion of the significant woodlot itself, they could cut some of the trees down without permission. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. Councillor Garcia, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Ms. McEwen, I'm curious, I think it was Councillor Phillips asked about the dwelling that is planned, and yes, I don't know, but if it is rezoned R2, what is the height limit in the zoning bylaw?
Through the mayor to the councillor, I have that here. The R2 height limit would be 10 meters to the midpoint of the roof is how height is measured in this case.
So 10 meters, which could theoretically accommodate 3 stories depending on the design.
I believe that's possible. Yeah.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, a question to Director Christie, if he's on, or one of his managers. Is he here? Is Director Christie
Yeah,
here?
you can ask your question. He's here.
Yes. I just wanted to ask if they support and agree with the assessment, I guess, from the region that the species of trees that are in the area that would be cut down are invasive species.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Through our discussions, we are of the belief that, yes, the assessment is correct. To the argument that invasive species have become part of the normal, if you will, environment, we didn't get into that discussion, but we agreed with the first level assessment.
Thank you. And further, Mr. Mayor, to Director Christie, so, and the planner has confirmed that the significant woodlot with the local, I guess, indigenous trees are being, this is being preserved at the back of the property near the creek, right?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, Councillor?
That the area that is of significance in terms of being native trees is being protected, and it's at the rear of the property, which is going to be beyond the fence.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we are satisfied with what is contained in the report.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. And one question, Mr. Mayor, if I may, of Director Kincaid. I know Ms. McEwen has already said this in her report, but because there were concerns from the public and one of the presenters, can you please re-emphasize to the public that this does not set a precedent depending on what another application may be?
Thank you. Through the mayor, to all of council and those listening at home or otherwise participating, we are not bound by precedent in this sense. The city's official plan outlines what tests would have to be met in order for us to assess an official plan amendment. The applicants retained a qualified person to undertake the appropriate environmental impact study, which was then reviewed by both city and regional staff for completeness and accuracy in formulating our recommendation. It's very much context sensitive and site specific based on the merits of its own application. So the approval or denial of the application here this evening would not bound council by precedent to future applications.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia. Councillor Kushner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question I have is, does the cutting of the invasive species, is that detrimental or helpful to the native trees? And I recognize that not all invasive trees are necessarily harmful.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The term invasive basically refers to the fact that it may be preventing indigenous species to flourish in that area. So removing the invasive species may in fact promote further growth within the area. But that's, you know, depending on what's there and what the actual species are there, it's hard to say, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kushner. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, given the fact that this council has declared a climate emergency, I certainly don't understand why we're willing or considering rezoning a piece of property from conservation natural area to R2. It just doesn't make sense to me at all. It was actually, I guess, from what the presenter said, it was rezoned to conservation natural area in 2013. I don't know if there's anybody on the planning staff who was here at that time, but why would it have been rezoned in 2013 to conservation natural area at that time?
Through the mayor to the councillor. So when we do a comprehensive zoning bylaw, we use the most up-to-date mapping that we have from the province, from conservation authorities, from the region. And that mapping is usually at not at a micro level on a site-specific basis. So it will usually extend a little bit further than the natural features on site. An owner does have the ability to say, I've done the studies, we've looked at it much closer, it's actually 5 meters this way or that way. So there is that opportunity to more accurately reflect where that natural area line should be when our mapping is based on a more larger scale view of the natural area mapping. That's why there may be a difference of going back and forth from G1 zoning.
Why are we rezoning it R2 rather than R1?
Through the mayor to the councilor, the rest of the area is R2.
Okay. I mentioned erosion of the creek before, and that creek is, it's amazing over the years. In visiting Brian Nari recently over a situation in his property, we were talking about how it's eroded, and I know in the last 10 years it's been set back considerably. I know it's probably not going to impact on the house that's being built, but it's certainly probably going to impact over time on the area that we are leaving conservation natural area. And it's not going to be fixed because the people who own both sides of the creek simply don't have the money to do that. And the city's not willing to go in there and assist with that. Should that not be a concern that we're going to be losing that natural area over time through erosion? To anyone?
Maybe I can start. Through the mayor to the councilor. If it's something that's being affected by the zoning amendment that's being proposed, it would be within our, if the development was making this worse, or if it was the cause of it, it's something that we could deny an application based on. If it's a situation that's happening along that creek area that has no impact from this development, it may be, we may have to go about it in a different route from the city's perspective.
Because it could end up in time that the person who actually owns that piece of property on the south bank, it could erode to the point where that person doesn't have any land left, and it's only the new person who is building the house ends up with the bank. It's eroding that badly. Mm-hmm. But okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Okay, seeing no further questions, there's a motion on the floor. So, Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to planning staff, I just, for the public and the people in the neighborhood, and I think for ourselves, you've got to, I just want to review when you say second planning opinion advisory. So you've gone through this whole process. It's been measured against our official plan and the region's official plan. It's gone to the NPCA, and you believe it passed all the tests. And you're advising that if we don't support this, that you'd want us to get a second planning opinion from an outside consultant. And in the event that that second planning opinion is supported by council and we make a decision that the matter should be heard before the tribunal, it would be that planner who would do that. Can you walk us through that? So if we ended up denying this application tonight and the, it would go to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and it would ultimately be up to the Land Tribunal to decide what to do with this. That's if the applicants chose to do that. Can you walk the public through this process? Because I sometimes feel like people don't know. And sometimes they don't understand if we approve or deny something, it can get challenged at another body, and I think that gets missed by the public. Thanks.
Thank you. Through the mayor to council and the public. What has happened here is an application for an amendment to the zoning bylaw has been made. Staff have let the applicant know what the tests were, what studies were required, and those were undertaken by qualified professionals and submitted and reviewed by not just city staff, by regional staff, MPCA, and a number of other commenting agencies and stakeholders in the process. Utilizing the feedback we get from those groups through their own perspectives, expertise, and policy environment, staff also undertake our own analysis that Planner McEwen has taken you through this evening, all the way from provincial plans, legislation, the regional official plan that was in effect at the time this application was received, and the city's official plan and zoning bylaw. Our analysis has resulted in the recommendation that's before council this evening, and that's currently on the screen. It's entirely possible for council to make a decision that differs from the recommendation of staff. And in this instance, what our suggestion would be is that council could defer this matter and retain a secondary planning consultant to review the application and make their own recommendation to council. And then council can make the choice on whether or not they want to go with the staff recommendation or their own second opinion that they have retained outside external planning advice for. The reason why this is important is if council were to deny this application, or if council were to apply certain conditions that were not seen as favorable by the applicant does have the right to appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal, at which point there would be a hearing on the matter. Depending on what matters are being appealed, if it's conditions or denial, city staff would be in a position where we could be subpoenaed or witnesses at that tribunal hearing, and we would be speaking to our analysis and the recommendation before you this evening. Whereas if council retained an external planning consultant that came up with a different recommendation, then that person would be then defending council's decision in that regard. Councillor, I hope that answers your question, but if I could be, there's further instruction, I'm happy to provide it.
No, I think that's super clear and helpful. Sometimes this is the first time something comes up in a neighborhood and people aren't familiar with the decisions and what we face as decision makers, that sometimes if we deny something that's been recommended or vice versa and it meets all the tests, it can go out of our hands and go up to another body. You know, so there's a lot to consider at this moment. And I also wanted to hear you discuss why it would be important to get an outside consultant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, I just need a mover and a seconder for a motion to get it on the floor. Councillor Sorrento, seconded by Councillor Harris. Okay, I'll look to the clerk to call the question.
Councillor Sorrento?
Yes.
Councillor Harris?
Yes.
Councillor Garcia?
Yes.
Councillor Williamson?
No.
Councillor Porter?
Yes.
Councillor Kushner?
Yes.
Councillor Littleton?
No.
Councillor McPherson?
Yes.
Councillor Miller?
Yes.
Councillor Phillips?
No.
Mayor Sendzik?
Yes.
And that's carried.
Okay, I'm going to turn the floor over to Deputy Mayor. I'm just going to step out for about 15 minutes and I'll be back. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to say it's nice to see our senior staff here for the viewing public, and the whole team is here. So, okay. So we are on 7.3, correct, clerk? Yes. Okay. Creation of the Vital Services Bylaw and related administrative monetary penalties. Notice of consideration of the creation of Vital Services Bylaw and related administrative monetary penalties has been published in accordance with the city's notice bylaw. The public meeting will proceed as follows. Clerk, I'm going to be reading this, yes? Okay, thank you. We'll proceed as follows. Manager Paul Chidoba of Bylaw Enforcement will explain the proposal. Members of the public were provided with options to submit written correspondence. No items of written correspondence were received. As today's public meeting is being held electronically, members of the public wishing to delegate were advised to RSVP with the office of the city clerk by 9 a.m. today in order to speak. No one requested to speak, and the public meeting will be closed at the appropriate time. So I think it would be Manager Chido. Go ahead, clerk. Yep.
I'm just going to say Councillor Dodge has her hand up. I think she'd like to declare a conflict.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Dodge?
Yes, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I'd like to declare a conflict as I'm an owner of a rental property as well.
Duly noted. Thank you, Councillor Dodge. Okay, proceed. Manager Chidoba, would you kindly proceed with your presentation, sir?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and to members of council and members of the public. Today being brought forward is a draft vital service bylaw for the city of St. Catharines. This is another step towards enhancing the health, safety, and well-being of the citizens in our community. Simply put, a vital service means the uninterrupted supply of gas or heat, fuel, electricity, and hot and cold water. This bylaw will provide clear guidelines as to who is responsible for providing utilities to tenanted dwelling units and when they are required. This bylaw has been coupled with a progressive administrative penalty structure to assist with obtaining voluntary compliance with these prescribed requirements and to hold repeat offenders accountable accordingly. The Bylaw Enforcement Division will be responsible for ensuring compliance with this bylaw, and these complaints will receive a priority response. As such, complaints about a disconnected vital service where the landlord is responsible for ensuring these services are provided will be addressed promptly with an intended quick resolution. Overall, thank you for your time and consideration.
Okay, thank you, Manager Chidoba. Are there any questions for the manager? I see Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the Manager of Bylaw Enforcement, have you seen, how much of an increase in these issues have you seen in the last year or two? Do you know offhand how many times you've had to respond to these types of issues? I know that I face these issues in my day job. I'm just wondering what you've seen out there.
Through the chair to the councillor, at this point, vital services are addressed under our property standards bylaw, so the exact data is showing you is very low. If anything, would be within about 10 or so responses in the past year. But that's also coupled with us not having a vital service bylaw and public awareness in terms of whether this is something that can be addressed by the Bylaw Enforcement Division.
Okay, so if a tenant, before that we pass this, if they called it Citizens First, they might not even be able to do just anything about this at all. So passing this might also, add some training to Citizens First so people can get their vital services connected pretty quickly now if we pass this, right? If they were without heat in the wintertime.
Through the Deputy Mayor to the councillor, that's correct.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Are there any other questions? I don't see any hands. Clerk, are there any hands up? Okay. Thank you. I do have a question for you, Manager Chidoba. Recently, we've passed a number of bylaws that have impacted the staffing with the Airbnbs and now I think the vacant dwellings. Do you see anything on your matrix as to how this is going to be impacting staff? Should it be the will of council to pass this tonight?
Thank you for the question, Deputy Mayor. In this regard, yes, we are, as we described to council about the vacant building registry and our response, we will be monitoring this and coming back to advise the service impact that has occurred from that. In bylaw enforcement, we are receiving a high volume of complaints and investigations, probably to their highest levels ever. So this would provide an additional operational need. But this is also coupled with other things that are going along with the Bylaw Enforcement Division. In response, we're responding additionally to noise complaints, as well as now business licensing is part of it. And we provide enforcement service for the new Boulevard bylaw. So all these things coupled together will have to be analyzed. It's too soon to tell exactly what our impact is going to be for vital service, as brought up by the councillor just prior, that some people might not actually know that this could be a possibility for them to report and have bylaw address. So yes, we will be monitoring this data and bringing that back.
Thank you very much. And Director Kate, did you want to add anything to that?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for the questions. I think the manager of bylaw enforcement has covered it well. We've been working on a program of modernization for our bylaw enforcement and municipal licensing section of PBS for the last year. And we have been bringing forward new programs to council. There will be even more reviews of municipal bylaws coming forward. And I think when the time comes that we're able to undertake an operational impact analysis and report back at that time would be the best time to do it, to provide council with all the information they need to move forward.
Thank you, Director. Thank you. Okay, at this time, we are closing the public meeting. We're supposed to bang a gavel or something?
You just asked for a mover and a seconder.
Oh, thank you very much, Clerk. Oh, I see Councillor Miller would like to move. Would you like to move that, Councillor Miller? The seconder, Councillor Porter. All in favor? Okay, the meeting's closed. The staff will now respond. Are there any questions from council at all to staff? Okay. Clerk, if you would care to call the question. I don't see any hands up. Clerk, if you would care to call the question, please.
We'll just look for a mover for the staff recommendation. Councillor McPherson and Councillor Porter, good with that? Okay. Councillor McPherson?
Yes.
Councillor Porter?
Yes.
Councillor Williamson?
Yes.
Councillor Phillips?
Yes.
Councillor Miller?
Yes.
Councillor Kushner?
Yes.
Councillor Harris?
Yes.
Councillor Garcia?
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Sorrento?
Yes.
And that's carried.
Okay, thank you. I think at this time we are going to go into the discussion reports, and I think the first report that is up is 9.1, Office of the Chief Administrative Officer, City of St. Catharines, People Strategy. I now call upon Dave Oakes, Chief Administrative Officer, and Aaron Ohosky, Deputy Chief Administrative Officer, to present. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This report is an exciting report for the entire senior leadership team. It's a culmination of a lot of work that's been going on over the last year, looking at a variety of issues specifically to our people and the corporation. And this people strategy that we're presenting is really intended to provide the next step in the organizational performance pillar that we were presented and council approved as part of the strategic plan update in April of last year. Next slide. So specifically, there will be actually two presentations tonight. The first being this report, and the next report that you'll see in terms of the multi-year budgeting are all part of the organizational pillar that was created in April. And it's all tied to getting the corporation to a point where we have the systems in place and the people in place to be able to deliver a lot of what council and the community have expectations of. There are a lot of reasons for us needing to do this and bringing this strategy forward. Specifically, over the last year, we've had the creation of the budget office. We've also implemented some transformational recommendations that came out of the audit and accountability report that came in front of council in 2019, specifically the PeopleSoft investment that we're working on in collaboration with Niagara Region. That is really going to allow us to be able to modernize the financial systems, which will then in turn allow council to be able to, and staff to better manage the day-to-day operations of the corporation. Specifically on that, Christine Douglas will be presenting in the next session, or sorry, the next report on that specifically. Next slide. So in terms of the next steps and what we're trying to achieve within the workforce strategy, we need to have an organization that is innovative, that is adaptable, that has the right people with the right skills, who understand the work plans and the expectations of not only their departments, but also the expectations of council and the community and all of the professional pieces that go into that. I think the past report and discussion on the bylaw speaks to the level of skill, training, technical expertise that all of our employees need and all have. And in order for us to be able to continue and build and modernize what we're trying to do, there are a lot of specific pieces that we need to do internally to be able to manage that. And in reality, everything that we do is revolving around our people. So we have to make sure that we have the right pieces in place and the right components within an overall strategy to help build that program. Why now? Specifically, we're in a very interesting time. I think we've seen it throughout corporations, not just only municipalities, but private sector as well. We're in a critical time when, it is definitely a employee market. There are competing interests. There are organizations that are trying to find top talent. The ability to retain, be able to recruit is something that we need to focus on. And in this strategy, there's a variety of recommendations that Aaron Ohosky will be providing to council after this slide. But it's really being able to have an organization that reflects not only compensation, but a variety of other elements that really build on the talent that we have in the corporation. So I will pass it over to Aaron just to build on that.
Thank you. Yeah, so the trends that the CAO presented on the previous slide in terms of those global, national, and regional trends have definitely moved beyond the realm of theoretical. They're hitting us here in the city of St. Catharines, and they're real impacts on our ability to offer the services, infrastructure, and amenities that our community relies on. So our concern definitely is getting this right so we can continue to offer those services, infrastructure, and amenities. Right now, there are specific consequences of those global, national, and regional trends that are hitting us. The first is on the recruitment side. We're noticing to a greater extent than in previous years, we're having more difficulty than we used to attracting for specific professions. For example, planning, building, engineering, legal, skilled trades, and other skilled professionals is much harder to find that talent than it has been in the past. On the contract side, whereas before we could fill contract positions, at present we're doing so with difficulty or just a complete inability to be able to attract qualified candidates to contractual roles. And on the casual and student side of things, we have experienced definite difficulties this year, both on the community and recreational and cultural services side. Specifically, for an example, is lifeguard shortages. We are very lucky we were able to open all our pools this year, but certainly other communities in Ontario and elsewhere weren't as lucky. So those shortages are real, as well as student positions that have had direct impacts. We haven't been able to fill our full complement, which has had impacts in parks maintenance, sports field maintenance, and cemeteries maintenance. So we're definitely starting to see the real consequences of this. Beyond the recruitment side, we're also seeing on the retention side real risks of loss of employees on two fronts. The first is we're noticing we have competitors for talent that we didn't used to have. There are employers in much larger markets that are now offering greater certainty around flexible work arrangements, which means worries that we didn't have before of employers that were beyond traditional commuting distance. No longer as big a factor, so that's a trend we're seeing, as well as certainly there are specific positions where competitors elsewhere do have higher compensation bands. So we're taking a very targeted approach to taking a look at what those specific areas are and making sure we're able to compete. Next slide, please. So based on that information and what the CAO has conveyed, we do feel that the time is right to follow up on that recommendation in the 2019 Audit and Accountability Report regarding our workforce strategy. What that would look like, we're just going over broad strokes of our approach with you this evening, but we'd see this being 7 action plans, which I'll go over briefly here. The first is strengthening leadership development, recognizing that more than ever, prospective talent is looking for great leaders in addition to just great organizations. So making sure we've got a strong contingent of managers, supervisors, directors, and CAO and deputy CAO is going to directly impact our ability to compete. The next is learning and development for employees across the board. This is particularly important because we're finding, and working with EY, is that a modern workforce really is looking for development opportunities. So our ability to guarantee career development, career growth is going to directly impact our ability to compete in this market. The third is modernizing our talent acquisition. The days of just simply putting up a posting and expecting a large quantity of qualified candidates, those days are behind us. We definitely need to be more strategic and targeted in selling our organization and what we have to offer to prospective talent. The fourth is addressing positions with compensation legs. So this is, again, taking a very targeted approach to finding out which positions in our organizations are not keeping up with even the midpoint of some of our comparator and competitor communities, and taking a very targeted look at those specific positions. The fifth is addressing workforce planning gaps. This goes directly back to the recommendations of the 2019 Audit and Accountability Report, where they found that given the number of services that the city currently offers, that staff contingent complement is spread quite thin. Of course, creating a performance measurement framework that's focused on results is very important to the success of what the CAO conveyed earlier, as is conveying an intentional culture of leadership, innovation, and service excellence that's tied to that performance measurement program. Next slide, please, and I'll pass it back to the CAO for concluding remarks.
Thanks, Erin. So you've heard some of the specifics. The critical piece to all of this, and it really builds on, as I've mentioned, a lot of the work that we've been doing as an administration, but also the conversations that I've had with council over the last year and a bit, in terms of getting our organization to be best in class and being we talk about best practices. St. Catharines is a community that should be a leader. This is a strategy that's going to allow us and position us to be that leader, to be the place where people want to work, to be the place that people who do not currently work here are very interested to do so because of all of the elements that we provide to the quality workforce. Everything we do in the public sector, everything we do as a municipality is based on our people and those who deliver the services, whether it's our underground services, whether it's our parks, our finance, our legal, the list goes on. We can only achieve the goals of council and the community with having the right people in place with the right skills, and those who actually, are able to deliver on that. And at the same time, having the vacant positions no longer becoming vacant. And we hear it quite often that we're not, we may be missing in certain areas. That's a function not of the inability of staff to do the work. It's a function of we don't always have the staff to be able to in fact do that work in place. So this strategy is really building on that. What we're looking for council tonight is to approve this strategy in principle. We will then be bringing forward a systematic series of reports that go more detail on the various pieces. But this is something that is 100% backed up by our entire senior leadership team. It's something that we all believe in. It's a priority that we know we have to make and meet in order for us to be able to help council achieve the strategic plan and the vision of what the residents want to be part of. So this is probably our most critical report, in my opinion, in terms of what this council can help move the community forward. So we're just looking at this time to have full support from council to be able to take the next steps. Thank you.
All right, thank you to the CAO for the presentation. And looking for questions from council on the strategy, the people strategy. Seeing no questions. If there's no questions, just a comment. When CAO Oakes was brought on, and as councillors would know, as part of the process, he focused. Councillor Garcia, do you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Do you want to finish first, or you want me to ask a question?
No, that's why I asked if there was any questions, and I would just make a final comment so you can ask your question.
You're welcome to find the raise hand tool there. Through you to the CAO and the deputy, thank you for the presentation. I mean, obviously, I agree that our people are our strength, and we must have the right people, and all of those strategies make sense. My question is, in terms of, to make sure I understand, if we approve this in principle, I found everything there except the investment target. I find a very vague concept, saying it's a certain percentage of payroll cost. I'm not sure what payroll costs are involved. Are we talking total payroll? Are we talking a certain payroll tied into that strategy? But my question is for you to them. I assume all that would be fleshed out later for us to approve. So approving this in principle is not approving any specific investment cost.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. Essentially what we're looking for today, we don't, and we shouldn't be going into that much detail until we have direction from council. We do have a plan to bring all of these forward through the budget process. This isn't intended to be a 2023 impact. This is going to be a multi-year program that we bring forward, and it's also not to suggest that all of it will have incremental increases on the budget. There's a lot of work that's going to be done after this evening with our newly formed budget office and all the departmental teams to really bring forward programs that build on the strategy itself, and all of that will come to council over the next several months and next several quarters as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia. So it looks like there's a couple people who have questions. Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm wondering if it's appropriate to ask a few of the senior staff who have to manage a large department what it's been like. I've had to go through this. I have to manage people, and there's been a lot of movement, and people in my not-for-profit have found slightly better jobs at the region, for example. So I have to, I'm facing about 50% new employees. I don't have a huge department, but it's a huge investment of time to get everybody up to speed, and you lose a lot of experience. So I don't know if everybody on council has had to manage in any sort of workplace or people and had to go through this. So I think it'd be important if any of the senior leaders want to speak to what it's been like, could they take the opportunity?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think I'll pass it over to Daryl Smith from the operations standpoint.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I can give you a very practical example that we're going through right at this moment. We have a recruitment out for the full-time manager of parks to replace a retirement that happened earlier this year. The recruitment's been up for a couple of weeks now. We still have a couple of weeks to go. We have 15 applicants. 10 years ago, we would have had 30 applicants. Of those 15 applicants, one is qualified. And that's the kind of issue that we're facing when we're trying to bring talent into the organization. From a turnover perspective, because we are losing staff to other municipalities that are paying better rates, it has a direct impact on our ability to deliver services. One of the areas that we struggle with right now is through our technicians that manage the repairs of the entire city fleet. We currently have 3 vacancies. We've had to lower our standard to get people to apply. So we normally require 2 certificates, a small vehicle certificate and a large vehicle certificate. Obviously, that's what we deal with. We have, because we can't get applicants, we have lowered that requirement to a small vehicle, and then we will train people to do the large vehicles. The problem with that is, as soon as they get trained to do the large vehicles, they're poached by another municipality. And that is not just happening just in our maintenance department, though that is a significant example. That is happening through all of our frontline staffing areas. Whenever
as much as you can put a system in place to transfer knowledge when someone walks out the door, you can never replace that corporate knowledge completely. So when you have someone that's walked out of the door that's been here for 20 years, there's things they know instinctively that other people will have to learn, which means it slows down our response, it slows down our productivity. So all of this has a continuing and ongoing impact on our ability to deliver services to the residents of St. Catharines. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Smith. Did you get my application? I take it I'm one of the 14 that didn't make it.
I'll be looking for it with bated breath,
I might put
Mr.
one
Mayor.
in too.
No, thank you for that insight, because I think that sometimes gets missed. They don't hear it as much, and I guess the retirement's also playing a role. C.A. Oakes?
Thanks. Just to build on that, and I know we have, we've heard, and you've heard the story in some of our other departments as well, planning and building in particular, that, we're really struggling from a competition standpoint and development pressures. One of the critical pieces to this entire strategy, and Aaron mentioned it in the presentation, we're going very strategic and targeted in certain areas. So it's not across the board. It's really looking at those areas, and we've done a very in-depth and detailed analysis of who the competition is, who the comparators are, how do we manage that. But it's also, and compensation is one thing. It's all of the other pieces that really build the corporation. It's about KPIs. It's about performance management. It's about understanding the fit within the organization and having a recruitment plan and strategy that makes people want to be part of the organization. And the way people want to be part of an organization is to see all of the services that we are providing to the employees, as well as seeing where we're trying to go as a community. And that's the exciting part, I think, from our standpoint, where we have a really exciting plan. I understand we're in an election year, but we know the momentum that St. Catharines has, and we're going to continue to push that forward in order for us to really achieve a lot of these motivations, a lot of these expectations from the community, whether it's climate change, whether it's managing all of the aspects of development and the subtleties that go into that. It's going to really require the right people. We have a community that has a lot of very difficult and technical type of development plans now, with an older community that is essentially built out, which requires an additional amount of expertise and skill sets. And so that means that we have to be able to do that. So the entire strategy itself is more than just that compensation piece. It's about creating the place that people want to work. I left for reasons to go to one organization, but I always had in my mind I wanted to come back because I see the potential, and now I want to help lead it forward. So I'm really excited. We have a lot of examples of people who have left and come back, and I think it's a real tribute to what we're doing at a senior team, what we're doing as an organization, and what council's doing. So I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. I don't know if Director Gate wanted to say anything. I guess I want to say to everybody watching and people who are running and have grandmaster plans for what they want to achieve as councillors if they get elected, you can't do it without the staff, is what I want to say. So that's what I want to end with. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Sorrento?
I'm good, Mr. Mayor. My questions have been answered. I just totally support staff, and it's almost like, please help us to move the city forward. And, we have baby boomers that are retiring, Mr. Mayor, and then we have a whole new crew of young people that might expect $60,000, $80,000 a year to start and 5 weeks off. And these are some of the things that is part of the reality, I think, as kind of intimated in the report, but totally behind staff. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other further, Councillor Miller.
Yeah, I just want to say I really support this report, and I'm excited to see it. You might recall really early on that we restored some of the training budget for staff, and we got a report on some of the morale, and I think we need to be cognizant of how much we are supporting staff and trying to, because I think when you cut budgets like past terms of council did for staff, you see the results not only in staffing, but the level of morale and support. So I hope we, not only we here support this, but the next term of council and future councils do as well. I think the best thing we can do at this table, generally speaking, not every time, is support the work of staff and support the recommendations of staff because they are the experts on what makes the city great and where it's going. So very hopeful that we will pass this and it will continue to be supported for years to come.
Okay. Any other further comments? Okay, so not seeing any, and I think everybody, all the councillors have spoken, have pretty much stated the way that I would feel. I was just going to say at the beginning that this was part of the CAO's work plan presented to us as a council as part of his vision for the city. So this is a major piece of CAO Oaks putting in front of us what his vision is for St. Catharines and for our staff. And so I think it's an important validation for us here to see the work and how it does factor into future, not just budgets, but the future growth of staff in our community. So with that, hopefully for the next term of council, the orientation will include these kind of presentations, and I'm sure that they will be included in this presentation will be included, because it is vitally important that as we head into the next term of council, that we are putting people at the center of decision making, and that includes the staff that work for the corporation of the city of St. Catharines. And so anyone who is in business today understands what's happening in the employment space, and the employment space is people are making choices as to where to work and how they want to work. And if St. Catharines isn't moving in that direction, we are going to continue to lose good people, and it's going to be reflected in the level of service that we provide throughout the entire corporation. So to CA Oaks and his team, thank you very much for putting this in front of us, and looking forward to seeing more of the design come out in future meetings. So with that, mover and a seconder, Councillor Porter, seconded by Councillor McPherson, and I'll turn it over to the clerk for a recorded vote.
Councillor Porter?
Yes.
Councillor McPherson?
Yes.
Councillor Littleton?
Yes.
Councillor Kirschner?
Yes.
Councillor Harris?
Yes.
Councillor Garcia?
Yes.
Councillor Dodge?
Yes.
Councillor Miller?
A hearty yes.
Councillor Phillips?
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento?
A double hearty yes.
Councillor Williamson?
Yes.
Mayor Senzik?
Yes.
And that's carried.
Okay, so we're moving on to another strategic discussion, and we're calling upon the Director of Financial Management Services, Ms. Christine Douglas, and she'll be joined by Manager of Budgets and Procurement, Lucia Chen, and also Michael Patterson, Budget Specialist, to do a presentation.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councilors, citizens, and senior staff. In May of 2020, staff laid out a plan to move towards multi-year budgeting as part of a multi-year recovery plan. Tonight, staff are requesting council's approval of a multi-year budget policy. This policy is an outcome of the audit and accountability report completed by Ernst & Young and the recommendation to modernize the city's budget process and support strategic objective of organizational excellence. Council recently approved the city's partnership with the Niagara region to implement PeopleSoft as the city's new financial enterprise resource planning system. The approval of a multi-year budget policy is a logical progression as to how we have matured as an organization with the creation of the Budget Office, which further enhances the partnership between all city departments and finance, the focus on system improvements and upgrades, and the city being the most dynamic, innovative, sustainable, and livable city in North America. One of the challenges ahead of the Budget Standing Committee and City Council and administration is to implement budget strategies that will enable the city to accommodate inflationary and staffing level pressures in the budget to maintain service levels while addressing various enhanced service levels. The approval of a multi-year budget policy is another tool that will assist with greater efficiencies in a more predictable financial framework, which encourages forward-looking analysis and evaluation. The economic prosperity pillar of the Council's 2019 to 2028 strategic plan includes two objectives: to develop a financial plan as an overarching guiding document that informs all financial decisions and investments, and to develop a 10-year capital infrastructure plan that includes all major investments to address city's needs, priorities, and growth. The approval of a multi-year budget policy supports both of these key elements of the city's economic prosperity pillar. With the new term of council set to begin later this fall, now is an ideal time to implement a multi-year budget policy as it aligns well with the long-term financial planning, which is critical to a comprehensive recovery strategy. Over the next several minutes, Budget Specialist Michael Patterson and Manager of Financial Planning, Lucia Chen, and I will provide more details on other municipalities with multi-year budget policies and other benefits of the city adopting this policy. Michael, over to you.
Thank you, Christine. As early as 2004, the City of Calgary implemented multi-year budgeting. This planning tool has several benefits which will be discussed later in this presentation. Due to the benefits, a trend started almost 8 years ago in which large municipalities began implementing multi-year budgets. Some of the early adopters included the cities of Calgary, Edmonton, Halifax, and Winnipeg. Next slide, please. As time passed and the benefits became understood, large municipalities in Ontario have started implementing multi-year budgeting. Some of the examples include the cities of Hamilton, London, and Markham, and the region of York. Next slide, please. More recently, municipalities with similar and smaller sized populations to St. Catharines have started implementing multi-year budgeting. Examples include the municipalities of Chatham-Kent, Guelph, Waterloo, and Innisfil. Next slide, please. The authority to create a multi-year budget is Section 291 of the Municipal Act. According to the Act, a multi-year budget may range from 2 to 5 years. In a multi-year budget process, if a multi-year budget process was implemented in St. Catharines, the budget would apply to all departments, agencies, boards, and commissions. Presenting the information on the next slide will be Lucia Chen, Manager, Financial Planning. Lucia?
Thank you, Michael. At a high level, the city's current budget process involves 5 steps. Each year, departments submit their budgets, which are then reviewed by city staff. Next, the budgets are reviewed, incorporating input from both the public and city council. Each year, the process is repeated and remains relatively similar. The focus is on historical revenues and costs over the past 3 to 5 years, with adjustments for new programs or changes and future impacts. And this process takes place normally from the first quarter to the end of the year when the budget gets approved by council. Next slide, please. After implementing the multi-year budgeting as proposed by staff, the process changes depending on the year in the cycle. The year 1 to 4 shown on this slide represent the 4-year council term, with year 1 being the year when council takes office. During the 4-year cycle, departments only submit twice in year 1 and 2. The focus during this stage is on achieving longer-term goals and objectives such as the city's infrastructure. In year 3 and 4, the staff review stage is changed from reviewing submissions to monitoring outcomes and identifying exceptions. Next slide, please. Some of the main advantages of multi-year budgeting include setting priorities that are efficient, accountable, and innovative, providing greater security regarding the direction of the city's services and finances to our community and tax and ratepayers, identifying future opportunities and challenges, balancing competing needs by completing business cases, which will link to council's strategic priorities and be submitted to council for consideration. Greater integration between short-term goals to long-range plans, which allows the city to move out of the perpetual budget mode that our current annual budget cycle creates.
It will provide better alignment with the asset management plan and other master plans, and it will improve cash flow management. Presenting the information for the next slide will be our Chief Financial Officer, Christine Douglas. Christine, back to you.
Thanks, Lucia. Following the approval of a multi-year budget and each subsequent year of the multi-year budget, council is required by the Municipal Act to review and re-adopt the budget of a given year. Adjustments could be made when significant external factors change, such as an economic downturn, recessions, or changes to federal and provincial policies. Unanticipated changes to economic forecasts, such as significant changes in interest rates, changes resulting from a service review, or changes to council priorities impacting services. With the approval of the multi-year budget policy, administration will review related budget policies in conjunction with our new ERP system, as there are likely to be the need to update our budget policies and procedures. The multi-year budget preparation, although presenting some upfront challenges with greater time required than completing a one-year budget, the benefits significantly outweigh the additional upfront effort required to prepare it, including more certainty on resources, multi-year work plans, and the evaluation of service delivery. Next slide, please. Tonight, Council will be considering the multi-year budget policy for adoption. Outlined here is the plan as to how the budget approval process will transition from the current one-year operating budget approval and one-year capital budget approval with the four-year forecast to a three-year operating budget approval and three-year capital budget approval with a seven-year forecast. Starting with the 2023 budget, Council will see the introduction of business cases that support new services or removal of existing services, as well as for increasing or decreasing the current level of service. This creates the ability to clearly identify the service changes being brought forward, what they are intended to address, how success will be measured, and costs and any potential revenue generation. In addition, the current budget information provided is very detailed, and moving to multi-year budgets will mean the movement to more summarized information, especially with the longer-term goal being towards service level budgeting. Staff will provide updates to both Budget Standing Committee and Council on the transition to the multi-year budget and bring forward any policies that require revisions or updates. Over the past number of years, the Budget Standing Committee has transitioned in September to a Committee of the Whole for budget deliberations. This practice will continue for 2023 budget process and for future years as well. Feedback from both council members and administration has been very positive on this change, and all of council being part of early budget deliberations will be very valuable for the change to multi-year budgeting. Next slide, please. To summarize, multi-year budgeting is a growing budget tool utilized by similar and smaller sized municipality. It eliminates steps in the current budget process, which will save council and administration time, enabling a redevelopment of effort to other issues, which creates efficiencies and strategic focus. It provides greater certainty to the community, tax and ratepayers on the direction city is going, enables council to implement a multi-year vision, which improves financial stability and accountability, and encourages a focus on achieving longer-term goals and planning with an emphasis on service delivery and continual improvements. As the city continues to navigate out of the global pandemic and a new term of council set to begin later this year, this is an ideal time to implement a multi-year budget policy as it aligns well with the long-term financial planning. The introduction and approval of a multi-year budget policy allows council to focus on objectives set out within a strategic plan while ensuring staff can also align work plans to the long-term program. Mr. Mayor, that concludes our presentation on multi-year budget policy. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Looking for questions from council before we adopt the strategy and policy. Any questions, Councillor Kushner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are two approaches to budgeting. One is, given our revenues, what can we afford? And the second is, given our requirements, what is the cost? And I guess the third would be a blending of the two. And which are you suggesting? Because if you look at the candidates for election for the city, they seem to talk about we can't raise taxes above the cost of living.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. The city in our budget development process, we look at a combined approach. We look at the revenues that the city is able to generate, and we also look at the cost of delivering the various services that the city is legislated, as well as the services that the citizens would like to see delivered.
Okay, thank you, and I think that's the appropriate approach.
Thank you, Councillor Kushner. Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Director Douglas or any other staff who wants to weigh in on this. When you are looking at this and you're imagining some of the plans, long-term plans that you haven't been able to do, like, can you give us some examples of long-range planning for certain items that really is challenging to do with a one-year budget, where if we were doing 5-year, if we got to the point of doing 5 years, we might be able to actually develop long-range plans in various areas. Do you want to give us some examples?
Thank you, through you, Your Worship, to the councillor. I think there are a number of situations where the multi-year budgeting can be beneficial to the city and the various plans that we have in place. And I think the most recent one is our asset management plan for our core infrastructure assets. And by developing a longer capital plan, we're able to further align our asset requirements within that asset management plan with our budget requirements and identify various areas of additional funding requirements. And I think it also puts us in a better position with regards to the various grant applications that would be required that come about from the upper levels of government. When it comes to other service lines, when we look at more within the operating budget area, or the service levels there, I think there are many areas where we are able to with a multi-year budget, we're able to plan the revenue that would be generated, and things such as that we're seeing in our planning department. They're working on a funding strategy, and we see how that the building reserve, how that supports the building area, and how if they had a multi-year budget, they would be able to further plan the various developments that are coming on board and how they properly need to staff for that. And they're looking at doing something similar with their planning resources. So there are many areas, and we're definitely not the leader when it comes to multi-year budgeting. As shown in the presentation this evening, there are many municipalities who have been doing this for a few years, and I think it's just a logical progression for the city to be following along.
Thank you. I fully support this, and I could see the benefit in so many areas. I didn't think about grant opportunities, but it makes a lot of sense to have a plan laid out already, so when grant opportunities come up, the plan is already there, and it's a whole lot easier to access the money. So I also fully support this, because I imagine fighting for resources between departments is probably a thing that happens every year, and if it was laid out over 5 years, we'd probably have a little bit more of a harmonious I don't know what it's like. I'm not on the senior management team, but I can just imagine that you're just always fighting for resources, and you don't know when your turn's coming next to get your thing that you actually really need. And I think it also helps depoliticize some issues, because sometimes things come up and councillors fight for something unexpectedly in their ward, and they might end up getting it prioritized sooner rather than later, whereas if they could see that it could happen in a long-term plan, staff would be able to manage a little better and plan to make these things happen. They're not always stopping and starting. So there's many reasons to go forward, and I commend the staff for moving in this direction. I know it's going to be a lot of work, but I think it's going to pay off.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff, likewise, I also support the concept of multi-year planning. I think it's something that is really necessary, and in fact, in the private sector, we go as far as 10 years many times. My question is, obviously it'd be a lot of work the first year, and then you are updating and adjusting and so on. But we have a different situation to the extent that we have some limited sources of revenue. So my question to you, to the Director of Finance, I guess, is will we have a set time, let's say early in the new year, when we would have a review to look at, for example, has municipal assessment really changed, or has inflation really changed? I mean, we're in a strange period right now in that we've had about 30 years of really stable inflation, and all of a sudden we have relatively high inflation, which we hope is going to be controlled. But anyway, that's my question in terms of the adjustments.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. As we've indicated in the policy, when it comes to adjustments for the operating budget, it is anticipated that that will occur later in the calendar year. So that would allow for business plans and budget adjustments that may have arisen for those to be considered all at the same time. With regards to capital budget adjustments, we would also, as much as possible, look to doing those adjustment discussions also once a year. However, with regards to the capital budget, if there are grant opportunities that become available and we need to make adjustments and it is over staff's delegated authority of $250,000, then those would be situations where we would bring forward recommendations to council for those adjustments.
Okay, thank you for that.
All right, thank you, Councillor Garcia. Any further questions? Not seeing any further questions. Again, I just want to acknowledge the work that's being done by the team, and I want to especially acknowledge Director Douglas. I think this has been on our collective agenda probably since 2015-16. I remember talking to Mayor Holder from London and asking him about multi-year budgeting, and he talked about the benefits of it. And then I came back and we had a further discussion about how can we look at implementing this. And this is a great example of how long it takes some things, because in order to achieve a multi-year budgeting, you had to have certain software systems being put into place. We had to have certain staffing requirements to meet the expectations of a multi-year budgeting. So all these pieces have been coming into play, and I think the pandemic probably took our timeline from what could have been already being implemented to it's going to be implemented in 23. And so again, just want to acknowledge CA Oaks for making sure that this goes forward, but more specifically to the director for making this a priority, because I think it will, as Councillor Porter had indicated, have a better outcome-based process. And I think it was Councillor Porter and Councillor Cisco who talked about specific budgeting. I think the city of Philadelphia does that budgeting. It's called
Budgeting for outcomes.
Budgeting for outcomes, and it's Baltimore. And I think, again, Director Douglas, there was a book you had read about budgeting for outcomes. Hard to do when you're doing it on an annual basis and you're trying to hit this magic number this magic number that'll make everybody happy. But the reality is that if we're not budgeting for outcomes, we're actually not going to achieve the long-term results that we're all hoping for. So I'm looking forward to the next couple terms of council to see how this actually materializes long-term. So good job. And it's another policy strategy. It was part of the work plan of the CAO. So that's two pieces of an important strategy that are in place. And I've been asked to have a mover and a seconder as the budget chair. I'll ask Councillor Littleton to move this, and seconded by Councillor Sorrento, who's been a financial hawk on this council. So I'll turn it over to the clerk for a vote.
Councillor Littleton?
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento?
A hearty yes.
Councillor Dodge?
Yes.
Councillor Garcia?
Yes.
Councillor Harris?
Yes.
Councillor Kushner?
Yes.
Councillor McPherson?
Yes.
Councillor Miller?
Yes.
Councillor Phillips?
Yes.
Councillor Porter?
Yes.
Councillor Williamson?
Yes.
And Mayor Sensik?
Yes, and just thinking about multi-year budgeting, I do want to acknowledge Councillor Miller, Councillor Porter, Councillor Townsend and Councillor Harris, who joined me playing basketball at Manchester. And it was for Niagara Regional Housing. There was a basketball day there where we were able to compete against the NRPS, the EMS. There was the St. Catharines Fire Department, Deputy Chief DeYoung was there as well. And she had her team of fire folks who really engaged with the Manchester community. Great to see, and I just wanted to acknowledge, I forgot to do that in my mayor's report, I want to acknowledge the councillors that came out and really lifted up the team, because without Councillor Miller's threes and Councillor Porter boxing people out, Councillor Harris really wasn't providing any kind of impact on the court, and Councillor Townsend was probably the quickest hands I've seen in a long time. So all in all, it was a great afternoon. So I just wanted to say that. Motions of the budget. Councillor Littleton, you have a motion on the floor related to the budget meetings coming up. If you want to just give a summary of the motion.
Yeah, basically, we're just going to go, now that we've seen how successful it's been in the last 2 years, and obviously this being an election year, we're going to move to an entire council, looking at the budget for the meetings stated September 19th, and then November 2nd and 9th, and the new council in November 30th. So that's what this motion says, and I look forward to working with everyone on this.
Okay, moved Councillor Littleton, seconded Councillor Miller.
Sure, I also just have a clarification question if possible. And sorry, I should ask this. The lame duck status doesn't affect this because it's about future, yeah.
Okay, so seconded by Councillor Miller. All in favor? And that's carried. Unless there was a question, my apologies. I can't see the screen in for me, so I have no idea.
Mr. Mayor, I
apologize. I can't see you on my screen.
I don't want to object to the motion, but I did have a question like Councillor Miller about, maybe through you to the court, how does the lame duck status affect our ability to approve budget?
Through the mayor, this council will not be approving the budget. It would be by the next council, so there's no impact of lame duck. Just starting to move things forward, get presentations, get information out there, and so the public can be aware as well, so that hopefully when the new term of council starts, the discussions are already started. Anyone running as a candidate can listen in and be aware, and hopefully a more smooth transition.
Thank you for that. And my other question, Mr. Mayor, just a procedural question. The way the motion reads, one of the meetings is November 30th, I believe, and that will be the new council, I assume. So should that not read that a new chair of the budget committee would be chairing that?
Through the mayor, the last clause of the resolution is to have Councillor Littleton as the current chair the meetings of this term of council. A decision on who will be the chair after the new term of council comes into office would be made by that next term of council. We weren't going to presuppose that outcome.
Okay, thank you.
Just a point of order, that would also preclude other councillors that don't return, whether they're defeated in election or what have you. The same stands for them too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I believe all in favor, show of hands. Okay, that's carried. The next one is Councillor Garcia. Again, you can read the entire thing, or you can just give us a synopsis of the exemption for volunteers for the Terry Fox Run.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think I need to read the whole thing. I think we're all familiar with the Terry Fox Run and what a great charity that is, and probably the best known, or one of the best known Canadian heroes that we have. And it's so great that they're bringing the event back to Port Dalhousie, which is of course good for the community, getting visitors, but also we're helping the Terry Fox Run raise money for cancer research. And as I point out in the motion, the volunteers do this exclusively as volunteers. They have no corporate sponsors because they're following through on the legacy of what Terry himself wanted. So we certainly hope that we can give them an exemption for that parking, because as they point out, it would certainly affect their ability to attract participants in the run if people had to park, to pay to park. So I certainly hope this will be unanimous, that you'll support this. And my hope is also that by September 18th, which is a Sunday that is targeted for the Terry Fox run this year, the demand for parking at Lakeside Park should have slowed down depending on the weather. So with that, I will, as I said, I moved it, and Councilor Williamson is seconding it.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Garcia. Councilor Williamson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just add that this is really less than half a day in lost revenue that we will cost general revenues from 8 till 1. And generally, the park doesn't start getting busy till after 10. So it's really kind of like mainly 3 hours. So it's not a full day. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Williamson. Would you be open to amendment that just says, and any future events for Terry Fox be granted in the future for this? We're going with this so it doesn't have to come back to council every year. If this event takes place in Port Dalhousie at Lakeside, can we just make this a regular exempted rather than having it come back to council? Would you open to that?
Absolutely, that would be great, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so there will be an annual exemption as long as it's being held at Lakeside Park.
Excellent.
Great job on this. So we've got a mover and a seconder, and all in favor, show of hands, and that is unanimous. Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillors. Special meeting, Council, Deputy Mayor, that one's up for you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do you want me to read this, or should we just?
Yeah, it's one line on the screen.
Okay, so that council approves special council meeting for Wednesday, September 28th at 6 p.m. and that a special meeting be held for the purposes of a presentation from the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation, and Parks, and that the city clerk be directed to make necessary changes.
Okay, moved by Councillor Sorrento, seconded by Councillor Littleton. And any information that'll be forthcoming will be notified as we get closer to the meeting date. Okay. All in favor of this? Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much. That's another meeting on the agenda for us as a council. And now we're going into the committee and task force minutes. That council received and filed the minutes of the advisory committees of council. We need a mover and a seconder for that. And Councillor Miller, seconded by Councillor Littleton. And any questions on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. And then we have a resolution 12.2. And I will turn it over to Councillor Miller.
Yeah, sure. This resolution comes from the Social Sustainability Committee via its equity committees, and specifically the Anti-Racism Committee. So this resolution, it says that the resolution from the Anti-Racism Advisory Committee in support of the TRC calls to action be received by City Council for information that the city staff develop an action plan to fulfill the municipal parts of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action with a time frame included, that city staff implement an education plan for staff about legal obligations under the UNDRIP and about Indigenous rights, and that City Council renounce the doctrine of discovery.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Just need a second for this one. Show of hands, if someone can second this. Councillor Porter. Councillor Littleton, you have a question?
No, I was just going to ask that this be referred to staff so so some of the, this could be discussed because there's an upcoming meeting with the Niagara Regional Native Center.
So it's a referral for a discussion that will be forthcoming with the Niagara Region Native Center. There is a meeting scheduled coming up, so the appropriate place would be to have that discussion with them before it comes back to council. Motion for referral. Any opposed? All in favor, show of hands, sorry. Okay, that's carried. All right, thank you for that. The next one, we do have a presentation on the next one. And this is a resolution from the Social Sustainability Committee regarding Jeff Dunham Performance and Meridian Center. We have Salah Wazirudin, who is going to be presenting. And he's, I think he's prepared to come onto the screen.
I am, but staff stopped my video, I believe.
Okay, so we're just getting that fixed up. Welcome, Mr. Wazirudin.
Thank you, Your Worship and councillors. And thanks for having me this evening. I'm Saleh Wazirudin, Chair of the city's Anti-Racism Advisory Committee. We've seen right here the brazenness with which the hate crime, vandalism at the Harriet Tubman Public School and nearby places happened without any hint of shame. You councillors and other elected officials in Niagara have experienced this brazenness directly, no fear of getting caught. We've seen the open brazenness with a recorded video of Deputy PM Christopher Freeland being harassed. They get this daring from the normalization of hate, from making a mockery and the butt of jokes of racialized people, women, and to us LGBTQIA+ people. You don't just have to take my word for it though. When StatCan recently came out with their report saying police reported hate crimes have gone up 72% just over the last 2 years, and that's a very narrow definition of hate crimes, and only the ones where people need to call the police, the executive director of the Canadian Race Relations Foundation said, it's a fire hose of hate that's growing honestly like a wildfire, and unmitigated, we will grow further to a point where we will normalize being on wildfire. And that is because we have left this environment unchecked. So there's no surprise about what's coming to town. Jeff Dunham's agent has already publicized that characters already condemned by industry associations and civil rights groups like the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation as racist will be in the act, like Ahmed the Dead Terrorist or Jose Jalapeno. But again, don't just take my word for it. Jeff Dunham himself said he doesn't want to be that offensive, but he feels he has to be because that's what got him to where he is. That's what he's made his living off of. But even more famous comedians like Jay Leno have apologized for a long history of racist jokes and said if comedians won't change, they shouldn't be telling jokes. And when complaints came in before, he had dismissed them as not being able to take a joke. But he knew then in his heart that he was wrong, and even he is admitting it now. You heard earlier tonight from the mayor about how sports are adapting. And so is comedy, and we should expect no less. Remember, please, that this is not just some private event that council is being asked to intervene in. It is an event on city property, paid for and maintained by our public money. The Meridian Center doesn't get teleported to another galaxy because there's a ticketed commercial event happening here. City policies still apply, and as our elected officials, you still have a say. The city already has a policy making clear there is zero tolerance for racism in this kind of performance. The Our Zone policy was initially designed to respond to hate and racism at sports events, but it's clear that it's for all events and specifically mentions the Meridian Center. Canceling this performance would not be that unusual. It's been happening rapidly in the last few years, especially since reopenings began since the pandemic. Just a few months ago, almost right across the border at SUNY Plattsburgh, they canceled a transphobic comedian. Several cities in the UK canceled a comedian just for a racist tweet last year, and his agent even dropped him. The residents of St. Catharines deserve no less, because you can't have it both ways. When there's a hate crime, we can't say we're a compassionate city, racism won't be tolerated here. But when a brazenly, openly racist, misogynist, homophobic act comes to town, we then say, oh, well, we have no choice but to lie down and do nothing. That's why it's vital to make an amendment to the motion tonight to direct staff to enter into negotiations with the relevant parties to pursue cancellation of this event. That's how it's been done elsewhere, and that's how we can do it here to start reversing what's been called an escalating wildfire of hate around us. St. Catharines is just one of the Ontario stops of Jeff Dunham's tour. We pride ourselves in our association with the history of Harriet Tubman, who did what was right without worrying about the barriers to justice and equality. St. Catharines has an opportunity here to lead the way, to bring the other cities in on this and to stop this harmful performance from not just coming to St. Catharines, but also beyond. From my experience, unfortunately, there are some who are more concerned about not offending the racists or those who think racism is funny than they are about the damage racism, misogyny, and homophobia causes to our communities. If Jay Leno can recognize comedy needs to change, if SUNY Plattsburgh can cancel a major comedian for transphobia, then we in St. Catharines can do the same. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for your presentation. Any questions of the council? Councillor Sorrento.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenter. I just need some clarification. Since you are the chair of the Anti-Racism Committee, which is an advisory committee to City Council, are you tonight, sir, representing that committee as the chair, or are you speaking as a resident?
I am speaking as the chair of the city's Anti-Racism Advisory Committee. Sorry, I thought I had clarified at the beginning. If I didn't, I apologize.
Forgive me, I must have missed that. So, so procedurally, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the clerk and/or to our solicitor, then do you have, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the presenter, so do you have the permission of the committee and all of the members?
Through your worship, yes, I do.
Thank you. No further questions.
Councillor Miller?
Thanks, and thanks, Sella. I think one of the big components here is to sort of go forward on the policy, and I know you and I talked about that when we talked about the sustainability level. But with regards to this specific show, what would your response be to the Meridian Center, who has basically said that their responsibility is to provide a safe environment within the venue? And I think the implication is if you're going to be hurt or offended by someone like Jeff Dunham, then don't go to the show.
Through your worship, I wish we could just whoever didn't want to hear this, because doesn't think racism is funny, could just bury their heads in the sand. But unfortunately, we can't. Unfortunately, this kind of performance, I hesitate to call it comedy, does cause damage that affects us all. It does create an environment that, as I read earlier from the executive director of the Canadian Race Relations Foundation, does normalize mockery and making the butt of jokes of racialized people, women, and LGBTQ2SI plus people. And that directly leads to an environment where people think it's okay to commit hate crimes, and that could escalate into violence. There is a direct link between the normalization of this kind of mockery and the spike in hate crimes we've been seeing locally and across Canada. And that's just not my opinion. Even comedians have realized this and recognized this, like Jay Leno himself.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kushner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're talking about a contractual relationship, and I would like to hear from our legal department after the questions are asked.
Thank you, Councillor Kushner. Councillor Littleton.
Your worship, if I could just comment?
That wasn't a question for you.
Okay, no problem.
Councillor Littleton.
Thank you to Councillor Kushner for asking that. I was going to ask the same, but I also wanted to ask about, I don't know if staff can answer it, so maybe I need to save it, but I do have questions for staff.
Yeah, for staff. So
Okay.
any further questions of the presenter?
Thank you.
Okay, the only question I have, and again, appreciate the presentation, is in terms of the scope of where we're going with, deciding as a council or as a committee what's appropriate or not. And to the presenter, would the next step be going into our libraries and removing books that would have characters of fiction that could be seen as offensive to a group?
Your worship, I think that's a different topic, but of interest, it is notable that the Welland Library actually did a decolonization project where they went through their material and addressed material that was anti-Indigenous. So, but that's right now. This is about a performance, a concrete performance that's coming to town, and other places have canceled such events, and it can be done. Other places have done it contractually, and it can be done by the city through negotiating with the parties that are involved.
And I appreciate the response. It's when council's asked to make a decision, we can't make a decision in a vacuum, because one of the points that you're making out is that it's at a public facility, but we have a public library that, while you've pointed out the decolonization of books, there are books in there that outside of that would be offensive to some groups. So do we, as a public property, do we go in and remove those books? And who makes that decision, I guess?
Through your worship, I mean, I'm certainly in favor of, removing, well, getting rid of anything openly racist, but I think that is different from what's being talked about here, because our zone policy is about actions, and not about materials, from what I understand. So if somebody was in the public library and they were making a racist speech, then I think that would fall under the our zone policy. But I don't think the our zone policy goes to literature.
And so, just as a further question, and I appreciate the comment to the presenter, as a further question though, we're talking about the artistic creation of characters, and there are books that are centered around characters. So Satanic Verses by Solomon Rushdie is someone that has been targeted because he created a fictional character. So there's groups that would have liked that book to remove. Do we remove that book from our library?
Your Worship, I can't speculate on a hypothetical. I don't know that.
Not a
that
hypothetical.
Book is sorry, go ahead.
It's not a hypothetical. That is offensive to certain groups. Do we remove that book?
I don't know if that book is in the library, but I don't think that's the same as a comedy act, or act that's being billed as a comedy act.
So just demonstrating how difficult it is to put a defined line on the creation of characters, and how do we as council address that? So I'm not debating with you. I'm just showing you how it impacts the potential overarching policy of what we look at within the entire corporation. So I do appreciate the dialogue. Councillor Phillips, you got your hand up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Director Christie.
But these aren't questions of the staff yet, Councillor? Just to the presenter?
Yes, I asked questions of staff.
No, this isn't for staff. This is for the presenter. Do you have a question to the presenter?
Yeah. My understanding right now is that this event is virtually sold out. We've had emails today from people supporting the fact that the event goes on. Are you not concerned that if it was canceled, there's going to be a lot of people who are very upset with, and your anti-racism committee has done some really good work, without a doubt, for the social sustainability committee. I'm not denying that, but my point is if this gets canceled, there's going to be, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000 people, however many seats have been sold, who are going to be very upset because the anti-racism committee has brought this forward, and it's going to cast a negative effect on the good work that you've done so far. Is that not a concern at all?
Through your worship, I think that this is exactly a point of that there's people who don't want to offend or upset the thousands of people who do want to watch a racist performance. But I think the damage caused by the racist performance is greater, and that we shouldn't. Unfortunately, there's a long history of not wanting to upset people who either are racist or who think it's funny. Think racism is funny. But I think that the damage that's caused by this kind of performance is much greater, and that's what we should be focusing on, and not on the people who bought the tickets.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kushner, do you have your hand up from last time?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. Seeing no other further questions of the presenter, thank you very much for your presentation. Just need a mover to receive the presentation. Councillor Miller, seconded by Councillor Porter. All in favor? Okay, thank you very much. And Councillor Kushner, I think you had the first question of staff, followed by Councillor Phillips.
Yes, my question, Mr. Mayor, is legal, and therefore it should be asked in camera.
Okay, so a motion to go in camera, and Councillor Sorrento, seconded by Councillor Miller. The reason for going in camera, I'll go over to the clerk.
So we're actually going to do two reasons if council does want to go in camera. First would be under the Municipal Act, Section 239(2)(f), which is advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. We're also going to go under 239(2)(e), E, which is litigation or potential litigation, including matters before an administrative tribunal affecting the municipality or local board. And this is regarding the resolution about Jeff Dunham's performance at the Meridian Center. And we're going in camera due to the contractual agreement between the city and ASM.
Okay, so all in favor of going in camera? Okay, that's carried. So we'll wait a few minutes and I'll just look to the CAO as to direction for staff. Okay, so we've come back from in camera. We do have a motion that is on the floor. I'll ask for the council coordinator to put it on the floor. It is moved by Councillor Miller, seconded by Councillor Porter, I believe. And it's a three-part motion. The first part of the motion is to receive the Anti-Racism Committee resolution regarding the performance by Jeff Dunham. The second one is to request that ASM Global consider canceling the Jeff Dunham performance, and that going forward, city staff look at creating guiding principles for future performances at all city facilities with input from equity-seeking groups and or advisory committees. So with that, does anyone, and I know we got legal advice, so we could just call the question.
Can I ask that we vote separately, Mr. Mayor?
Yep, so we'll split the three apart. Councillor Phillips, and then Councillor Miller and Councillor Porter.
Just a question to Director Christie. Could you clarify the R-zone policy as to whether it applies to this performance or not?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the R-zone policy was developed with every intention to address issues that we were experiencing or that our major user groups were experiencing while attending programs at our facilities, which in this case would be related to our sports activities. And as you know, the Meridian Center also hosts those types of activities, and so that's why the Meridian Center was included in the list of facilities for the policy. It did not name these types of performances, so in my opinion, it doesn't apply.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Councillor Miller?
Thank you. Through you to the Mr. Christie, if someone walked into a hockey game and was espousing homophobic language or language that targeted identifiable minority groups, would they be asked to leave?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes. So the intent would be the major user group who would be renting the facility at that time would deal with the infraction at that time and ask that person to leave. It wouldn't be for the staff necessarily to intervene. It would be the major user group that would be renting the facility to do that.
And I think this is where this looks hypocritical, to have the policy that is intolerant of intolerance in our arenas and our public facilities, and then to not have a policy that allows for someone who might be espousing the same thing to be paid lots of money to come into our city and do that with no real issue there. And I think the mayor asked a good question about who makes these decisions. Ultimately, we make these decisions at City Council about city facilities and city contracts. We do it with the input of committees like this committee that we specifically set up to provide the lived experience of racialized people who actually experience racism, like none of us at this council does. I think we have seemingly scoffed at their recommendations a number of times. I can think of the Watson statue. I can think of CCTV cameras downtown. I can think of body cameras on police, the demilitarization of the police. We never voted on the resolutions around truth and reconciliation and murder and missing Indigenous women. I think it creates an atmosphere of distrust when we ask for this committee to give us their experience and we don't take those experiences seriously. What they're asking for us to do is pretty basic here, is to ask the Meridian Center to consider canceling a show that racialized people in our community consider harmful and hateful. And I don't think it's a stretch to see why. With Jeff Dunham's show specifically, with characters that some of the most Islamophobic and homophobic things I've seen and heard on a comedy stage, things that were hateful and out of place 20 years ago, and certainly are now as well. So I think it's important for us that we start to support these committees who are doing the labor of providing their painful experiences to us. And again, I do think it is a bit hypocritical given our zone policy. So to me, I think asking ASM is a pretty easy thing to do with regards to this specific show, and the bigger picture is to have a policy in place that allows racialized people, allows members of the queer community to provide input on these performances that are happening in our city at city facilities. So that's why I brought the motion forward, and I'm hoping we can support that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Porter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This has been an issue for a while. I feel as if there's a bit of a disconnect or maybe a misalignment between ASM's diversity policy. When looking at it, it's actually kind of weak, and where the city's going and the direction that we're headed. And I'm actually quite disappointed. When I saw this announced, I posted about it on Instagram and I said, really, like, I was literally shocked. I thought it was honestly poor decision making. And of all the comedians in the entire world that we could book in our city, this is a choice, and I just don't understand. So I'm really in favor of the policy. This is a really interesting discussion around, what is free speech, what is unacceptable. And Jeff Dunham is, he's built his career on racist, anti-Semitic tropes. I have no trouble saying that because just a simple Google search will return all kinds of things, and it's easy for anyone to see some of the things that his characters have said. And when it's all under the guise of humor, this is how he gets away with it, and he does acknowledge that I only offend, a certain percentage of the population, where most of his people who support his comedy are white people. Back in 2018, I was in front of the Meridian Center protesting because there was a call to ask the Meridian Center to cancel the band Headley because the lead singer was, there were serious allegations of sexual assault and abuse of women and also teenagers, underage girls. And at that point, it wasn't new news. It was, he had been dropped by his management company. He had been dropped by Caesars in Windsor, a private facility. And there was a debate and discussion around, should we cancel this? The Meridian Center decided not to cancel. There was a protest out front. I was there, and other private facilities said, we'll honor your Headley ticket and we're gonna have a show with someone else. And I feel that at that time, there should have been a discussion or a review around cancellation policies for situations like this, insurance, so that when these situations arise, we can protect ourselves, protect the corporation. But my position is it is a municipal facility. It is currently taxpayer funded to some extent. And I feel like this is an important opportunity to ask ASM Global to take a look at our equity, diversity policies and where we're going as a community, and do a better job booking better acts. And I feel like they're I worry about people who work at the Meridian Center who, for example, are Muslim, and they're going to have to sit through an Ahmed the terrorist show, and where's the thought behind that? I'm struggling with it. So I understand that because of contractual obligations, the council cannot tell Meridian Center what to do, or we can't force them to cancel it. But this is a great opportunity to have a review of our contract and ask them how they can improve their booking and how they can align and maybe listen to our anti-racism committees on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Any further comments on the motion? Councillor Kushner, I see you reaching for something. Yep. Councillor Kushner? You just got to unmute too.
Yeah, the conversation we're having reminds me of one we had several years ago about books being banned in the library. And we had a group that found some of the books extremely offensive. And I thought they were very insensitive. But then they came to council and they wanted council to ban the books. And our policy was that we shouldn't get involved. That was up to the library board to make decisions on banning books. And of course, librarians are not generally not in favor of banning books. So I think we made the right decision not to get involved and let the library do it, because even though it wasn't contractual, we did have an arrangement with them. And then years later, we had Michael Ignatieff, who was the leader of the Liberal Party and leader of the opposition at one time, make some pretty disparaging comments about Ukrainians in his book. And the Ukrainian community was very, very alarmed. And I didn't agree with Ignatieff's comments, but at the same time, I respected his right to make it. And because I found them very insensitive, I certainly was not in favor of banning his books. He's a very thoughtful individual, but of course, at times, our comments can be very insensitive. And because they're insensitive, that doesn't make the person a racist, because we do have freedom of speech, and I will not be supporting the recommendation before us.
Thank you, Councillor Kushner. Councillor Littleton?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that this is a really interesting conversation that we're having, and it's necessary, and I think it's really good. And what part of this motion that I think is excellent is the third part, that going forward, city staff look at creating guiding principles for future performances. I think really that's what I think that we can take from this. I'm just going to be honest. We can for sure ask ASM to consider canceling it. The answer is going to be no. Like, I think we can ask, and people say, well, you should ask anyway. But I think at this point, like the concert of sock puppets, like I don't even know what this guy is. I think everybody, what I'm hearing though, like about this guy is not good, and it's not a show. Obviously, this is probably why I have no idea who this guy is, because this is not something that I would want to watch. And I know what Councillor Miller is talking about when we talk about some comedians. I was at something at Frosh Week of a very famous comedian, and he got on stage, and now he's very famous and he's very well known. At that time, he was just starting out. He was a cast of Saturday Night Live, and it was horrific, the things that came out of his mouth. And it was like all over the newspaper, and they couldn't believe that he had gotten booked, but nobody had actually looked at the show that he did. They just thought, well, we'll get this guy because he's coming into his own and what have you. But it was a nightmare. It was just awful. So I can just imagine what the sock puppets are saying in this performance. So I'm glad that the committee has brought this forward. Clearly, I wish that we had this though, like 6 months ago or something, because maybe we could have, I don't know. Like, I feel like we're really out of time here to do anything like that. And also, we just heard we actually can't cancel it. So that needs to be clear to the public. We cannot do that. So I'm really excited about number 3 and appreciate the work for bringing this forward and at least sharing all of this information with us. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Littleton. Any further questions? I'm not seeing any hands go up.
Mr. Mayor, procedural question. Someone asked that the motion be split into 3 parts.
Yes.
So could we vote on them separately, please?
Yes. Yeah, we'll be doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so, again, my final comments, not to go any too much further, but again, this is in isolation. I think it's not an area where we should be making a decision in isolation, because while some people may take offense with the artistic element of the performance, it's better to have a policy to look at first. And I will say this, we own the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre. It has a film theatre in it. It is programmed 365 days a year. And I am sure certain films that are shown there would be offensive to certain groups, but they too don't have a policy to look through and figure out what can they show and can they not show. They do it because they look at it through a lens of artistic integrity and say, what should we show on the screen tonight? So I think point number 3 is probably the best part of this motion, in that it does give hopefully guiding principles. But in that decision, we must always remember as council, we're not the thought police. We are not the ones that ban books. We are not the ones, it's not our decision, even though that's our facilities. But if we can have a policy and those who are making the choices for selection, they'll be able to look at and say, here's what's best for our community moving forward. So I'll ask for the motion to be split as requested. We'll start with the first one, and then we'll move through to the second and third one. So the first one is to receive the information. Can we do a show of hands on that one? So to receive the information from the Anti-Racism Committee. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. We'll go to point number 2, and that'll be a recorded vote.
So on the second clause, Councillor Miller,
Yes.
Councillor Porter,
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento,
No.
Councillor Williamson,
No.
Councillor Dodge,
No.
Councillor Garcia,
No.
Councillor Harris,
No.
Councillor Kushner,
No.
Councillor Littleton,
No.
Councillor McPherson,
No.
Councillor Phillips,
No.
Mayor Sendzik,
No.
and that's lost.
On the third one, recorded vote.
Councillor Miller,
Yeah.
Councillor Porter,
Yes.
Councillor Phillips,
Yes.
Councillor McPherson,
Yes.
Councillor Littleton,
Yes.
Councillor Kushner,
Yes.
Councillor Harris,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Dodge,
Yes.
Councillor Williamson,
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento,
Yes.
and Mayor Sendzik,
Yes.
and that's carried.
Just some direction from the CAO in terms of, as we know, we don't want to be in this situation 6 months from now. So when can we anticipate a policy being created?
Through Mr. Mayor, we'll target to do this as quickly as possible with that we're going to get into some timing issues with the input from the various committees. But yeah, we'll look to do this as quick as we can.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we now move on to what is reading of the bylaws. That bylaws is listed on the council agenda A through L, save and except for D, be read a first time, considered and passed. They be signed and executed by the mayor. And we'll go Deputy Mayor Sorrento, McPherson, is Councillor McPherson. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. And this is the last meeting of August, so just want to say, hope everyone's had a great summer as we head into fall. And it's been great to have Deputy Mayor Sorrento. And you can, what? No. So you're moving the motion.
I'm moving the motion. Thanks.
Okay, seconded.
It's an honor to be deputy mayor.
Second by the incoming Deputy Mayor Littleton. Can you second it? Would you like to make a speech? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Have a good evening.
You as well.